his time leading the Doge. They're going to take a bit of a victory lap any minute now. But we also wanted to consider the actual math behind that victory lap if we're painting it as one. We spoke with Ernie Tedeschi yesterday, director of economics at Yale's Budget Lab, and began by asking him, Elon Musk, having come into this role pledging to cut $2 trillion in spending in the U.S. government, did he really get anywhere close? This is what he said.
Not even close. So I can confidently say that we're not even close to that. It is highly uncertain what Doge has done. I mean, I will tell you a couple of things. Number one, government spending overall, even non-interest government spending, is higher than it was the last 2 years at this point in the calendar year. We don't see any meaningful decline in the top line number. There are some meaningful declines in individual agency. Obviously, USAID is way down from where it was at this point last year. But it's harder to parse out in other agencies. The last thing I would say is that, and this is a little bit more positive on the Doge side, to the extent that there are savings in terms of federal compensation and salaries, right? Those are delayed because a lot of federal employees who were let go or took deals are still getting paid, right, on a day-to-day basis. So we can't see those savings in the meantime. As of right now, we don't see anywhere close to $2 trillion in savings, or reductions that are consistent with $2 trillion in savings. If I had to guess, I would guess that the savings might, come to more like $50 or $100 billion over 10 years.
Elon Musk in the farewell post on X not only thanked President Trump, but went on to say that Doge's mission will only strengthen over time. Do we have any reason to believe that's true?
I think that what Elon Musk probably found in this position is that it is very hard to administratively cut, number one, any spending at all, and number two, to cut, spending where it really actually moves the fiscal needle over time. Look, the main drivers of our unsustainable deficit and debt over the next 10 years, other than tax cuts, the lack of revenue, is growth in programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security in particular, and then, of course, the resulting interest increases. You can't do that with administrative cuts from an agency like Doge. Those mandatory spending programs require action by Congress. A lot of the administrative cuts that Doge tried to make also require action by Congress because they're cuts to congressionally mandated agencies. So look, I think that Elon Musk probably thought that there was an efficient way to get around legal process here. And it turns out that they're not. You have to get the approval of the people, the approval of Congress for a lot of these things.
Great conversation with Ernie Tedeschi. We learned a lot, the director of economics at Yale's Budget Lab, former chief economist, the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Kaylee, he kind of said it all. Did we get anywhere close? Not even close. We promised $2 trillion, and I believe, are we going with $16 billion? As he leaves on day 130 here, is the in fact number of dollars cut?
Yeah, the receipts have been complicated in this. It's unclear whether or not some of the programs he said he was cutting were actually things that were not cuttable in the first place, or were predated contracts, and the math has always been kind of complicated. I'm sure he's going to throw some figure out there when he gets his chance to speak from the Oval Office, although, again, that was supposed to start at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we are running a little bit late, it seems, at the White House.
Just imagine what's happening behind the scenes. They're taking pictures, right? Family photos.
Yeah.
X is running wild.
Perhaps. He does he's been a frequent visitor of the White House.
Laura Davison covers this for a living, and in fact has to not only cover the story, but corral the reporters as Bloomberg's Washington Deputy Bureau Chief. And she's waiting along with Kaylee and I, joining us right now on Balance of Power. Laura, it's great to see you. What is the celebration today? Is it about dollars cut, or the sort of reformation of government here, the closure of entire agencies under Elon Musk's watch?
This is really about both men, Trump and Musk, wanting to show that they are still friends and moving forward. Both people have incentives to say that there's a good relationship and this has been maintained, despite what looked like a very rocky tenure for Musk at the White House. Musk, of course, wants to have the proximity to the president, have the ear of the president, be an advisor. His companies will still do a lot of business with the federal government going forward. And Trump and Republicans more broadly are still hoping to get some of Musk's money for their campaigns. Musk was the biggest political donor in the 2024 cycle, and they were, hoping that he would continue to donate in the midterms and then again in 2028.
Well, of course, he told Bloomberg at the Qatar Economic Forum in an interview remotely that he feels like he's kind of done in that for now, unless he sees a reason to have to spend his money. And so I wonder to what extent, Laura, you actually are expecting he's going to be taking a step back from politics entirely, or if this is just going to be in a less formalized way, if he's still going to be tight with the president, still going to be musing about policy decisions on X, still going to be weighing in on the decision-making of specific lawmakers, or is this really an Elon Musk getting ready to focus more on Tesla and SpaceX, get back to business?
It's really unclear at the moment. His shareholders, particularly at Tesla, are really hoping that he will continue to focus on the company. Obviously, a launch with SpaceX earlier this week that did not go as planned also has stakeholders in that company worried that Musk's attention has been all over the place. It's really just remarkable to think through just really the past year or so. At this time last year, Musk was not involved in the Trump campaign. It wasn't until later in the summer that he really jumped in, was giving a bunch of money, was traveling around with the president. So it's a really remarkable, turn of events. Musk had only been tangentially involved in politics until then. We could see a lot of twists and turns here just over the next year or two.
Just imagine that. It's been less than a year since he's been involved in this, Laura. That's incredible. And when you think about what the New York Times reported today in its Musk expose, that was around the time when he was on the campaign trail, that he was getting much deeper into drug use, ketamine, psychedelic drugs, to the point where he was carrying around like a medicine box, they say, that was full of pills. That's coming up in this news conference, I'm guessing, today. What's going to be the reaction?
This is almost certainly going to be one of the first questions that Musk is asked about, his drug use. He, has talked publicly about, less severe drug use in public forums in the past. Ketamine and other substances is something that has been associated with him for a long time. But this, of course, raises a lot of questions about, someone who has the ear of the president, who is, sitting in on calls with foreign leaders, is asking the president to, make certain decisions. Someone who may be impaired or under the influence, has raised a lot of national security concerns.
If we go back to the Doge for a second, Laura, knowing that Congress, while out of session still for the Memorial Day recess, is returning to Washington next week. And our understanding is that the House is going to, in pretty short order, receive a rescissions package from the White House to actually start to formalize some of these cuts that Elon Musk has made. Do we have an understanding of what those rescissions are likely to look at, how big they're likely to be in the grand scheme of things?
Yes, this will be roughly about a $9 billion package, which, just remember, Musk started out with a $2 trillion goal for Doge, all the way down to $9 billion, really just a rounding error. This will include cuts to funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, so National Public Radio and PBS, in addition to foreign aid funding, including the funding for USAID. This, is a very, very small package and very small in scope for what, Musk's initial vision here was. Though it's clear that the USAID, that was one of the first agencies he went into wholesale, started to dismantle. That may be sort of the lasting legacy of Doge here.
It's going to be a long day for the president. It's not just the show in the Oval Office, which I'm assuming becomes the cold open to SNL no matter what happens this weekend, Laura. He's going to U.S. Steel for what could be arguably a more important event here, in that we might learn some news about this arrangement between this partnership, as he put it, Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. Are we getting a campaign rally tonight? What are we going to see when he gets to Pittsburgh?
This is almost certainly going to be a campaign-style rally. He'll be up in Pennsylvania. It was a swing state. Has spent a lot of time up there. Trump is very intent that this is a partnership. That whereas the Japanese have been insistent that this is a purchase, that this is that they are acquiring U.S. Steel. The details here are still quite murky. It's not clear that a deal yet has been finalized. But Trump is trying to at least sell this in what'll be a critical swing state going forward in 2028.
Well, and talk to us about the dynamics in that swing state, Laura, because when this deal was initially proposed, obviously both Trump and Biden were not for it. They suggested that this would actually harm the U.S. steel industry, but you also had folks inside the industry saying, no, we actually want this deal to happen for our own job protection. And now it seems that President Trump's framing of this has changed very much, where he's talking about this is going to create 70,000 jobs. This will make sure that the U.S. has a strong steel industry. What is behind the kind of shift in attitude around this entire deal here?
Part of it is just the economics of this deal. If he's realized that he's had both sides of in his ear saying, "Hey, look, there's some reasons for this deal to go through." You've also seen Trump in the early months of his presidency get very interested in tallying up all the sort of foreign investment in the United States he can get. He's had CEOs come to the White House, hold press conferences with him, saying, "Look, we're going to build factories, we're going to add jobs, we're going to do all of these things," and particularly in an iconic, sort of industrial industry like steelmaking. That's just something that really speaks to Trump's core. He likes to see those jobs. He likes to see those plants. And this, ultimately ended up dovetailing with his economic agenda, even if it didn't quite align with his political rhetoric on the campaign trail.
Do we have any idea what the run of show is for tonight, Laura? We're going to have steel workers up on the podium. And I'm asking that because we know that the steel workers opposed the takeover when it was proposed last year. This being framed as a partnership may go over differently. Is that possible?
It's very likely. The Trump team is very, very good about looking at the background, the optics, the people who come up on stage. Of course, yeah. Trump also likes to call people who may not be expecting to come up. So there may be a worker that he speaks to before the event. We can be certain that members of Congress, senators from Pennsylvania will also be there. We may hear from them, and there could be someone else. It could be a member of the Trump family, a donor, someone else. So we could see really a show. Trump has not been able to do some of these rallies like he really enjoys them. He feeds off the crowd. He finds them to be really enjoyable. A lot of the events at the White House are much smaller. He usually does come out and speak at least once a day, but this will have the lights, the music, a nice primetime Friday night event.
Well, I wonder if China is going to work its way into his remarks somehow. It certainly worked his way into his morning musings on Truth Social, Laura, as he talked about China not abiding by the terms agreed to in Geneva when it comes to trade. No more or so much for Mr. Nice Guy, is what he said, to quote him directly. Are we about to see Mr. Mean Guy come out on China? Are things taking a turn for the worse here?
It seems to be the case. What markets, I think even the Chinese, as well as, those of us in Washington are wondering is what specifically is not going well in this deal. He came out and said that the Chinese are not abiding by the terms of this deal they set out in Geneva a couple weeks ago. Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade rep, said as much as well. Scott Bessent has said things are a little bit stalled. He's always, kind of more moderating in his comments. But it's not clear what the problem is here. This, of course, has been a very rocky situation, going back to Trump's early days in the White House, where he was throwing on 10%, then additional 20% tariffs on fentanyl. Those rates went all the way up to 145%. Now we're back down to 30, with the hopes of a broader deal being worked out here over the next couple months. But it seems that they have again hit a snag. This has been a recurring problem for Trump. Think Putin, think with Israel, of that he thinks that a deal is very close and that he's able to close it, only to have a more squirrely negotiating partner on the other side than he would like.
If you're just joining us on Bloomberg TV and radio, we are waiting for an event to start in the Oval Office with President Trump and Elon Musk. We thought they'd be well underway by now, having been scheduled to start around 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We will get a news conference, and whether it happens inside this program or not, we'll bring it to you here. Laura, the idea being that he's wrapping his work as head of the Doge, but the president says Elon Musk will continue to come to Washington, will continue to be part of the family here, I guess, in the Trump White House. We don't have a sense of what that will include, though, do we?
We don't. We've gotten a little bit of a sense of that just over the past couple weeks. It was about a month ago that he said he was really, taking a big step back from Doge, and that he'd be in Washington maybe 1 or 2 days a week. He was going to be spending more time with his companies. This is when we really started to see bad earnings reports come out of Tesla. Of sales were way down. Investors were getting very worried. But he's still been here. When Ramaphosa, the South African head of state, was here just a few weeks ago, he was there for that meeting. He was in the Oval Office. I think we'll sort of, when there are issues that are important to Musk, we'll see him here, whether that has to do with his home country of South Africa, whether that has to do with EVs, space exploration. And remember, Doge also continues. It is, in the executive order that created it, it's set to continue until July 4th of 2026. So there's about a year left of it. He could pop in and out. There's a woman by the name of Amy Gleason, who's the official head of it. She's more of a technocratic person at the Office of Management and Budget, but there's also Doge staffers that are staying on. We did did report yesterday that Steve Davis, also who's the head of Musk's Boring Company, he is also leaving. So we could see some of these bigger names start to step away. But it's still a vehicle that's there and will be on the books for a little bit longer. If Musk wants to pop back in, he could, come back in. He'll continue to have White House access privileges. He may not have his office and his email address as he did as a special government employee, but he's got the president's phone number, and that's almost the highest ranking thing you can get.
Well, that's very true. Phone number, I guess, ice cream, middle of the night privileges, access to the Lincoln bedroom. Got a lot of things going in his relationship with President Trump. Laura, I wonder how much the legacy of Doge is also going to be about how litigious it got, how much it was actually action we saw in the courts that were helping to make or break Elon Musk's efforts around this entire initiative.
Yeah, this is a story that is still playing out. Even just today, the Department of Transportation said that they were going to be delaying some layoffs that they had planned because this case was still being worked out in courts. Same at the Department of Labor. The total cost, both in the terms of the number of jobs, as well as whether Doge ended up saving or costing, which is possible, the federal government money, still remains to be seen because so much of this will be fought out for months, if not years. Doge really only lasted 130 days. In terms of its really intense period, but the fallout here could be for months or years. You have folks, particularly in the scientific community, experts, on safety, mine safety, and traffic safety, airplane safety.
Yeah. It looks like he's arrived. Laura Davison, thank you so much for spending some time with us as we bring you now, as promised, to the Oval Office a bit late. President Trump behind the desk in the Oval, Elon Musk standing at his side. This is live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
One of the people who I've respected over the years, from Joe Kiernan and Rick Santelli. This just came out, and we'll just play that for a second.
Personal income is up 0.8%. That is almost triple the expectations. Yeah, I'll tell you that the income numbers, really, for the first 4 months of the year, they're stellar. They're really stellar. I mean, I could go back and look at the first 4 months of many different years. Really very strong numbers, and you're right. This administration is criticized for just about everything under the sun. I've never, ever in my lifetime had glimpses into the politics of an administration in the form of transparency like this one. Why don't we be, give credit where credit is due? Income really shooting up.
Rick, I also thought everybody was going to get one last order of imports that were going to be tariffed, and they were loading up on things. How the hell they already fix the trade, or not fix it, but to cut it in half? That's crazy. So there wasn't a lot of front loading of things that they needed before the tariffs hit.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it really does call into question some of the conventional wisdoms. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next month when we get this number, or we see some of the other numbers like current accounts, see how they fared. Because I don't know, I've been watching these numbers a long time. I don't think I've ever seen the trade deficit cut in half in 1 month.
Not bad. All right, not bad.
Come on, guys.
I see Howard and Scott are here, so it's great. You guys want to stand over here? You might as well. You're the ones that help produce those numbers, and it'll only get better. The tariffs are so important, and that's why we were so happy with the decision yesterday where the tariffs continue, because without the tariffs, our nation would be imperiled. We would really be imperiled. I think I can say that with great surety, Scott and Howard. And so we were very happy to get that decision, that big decision yesterday. And today it's about a man named Elon, and he's one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced. He stepped forward to put his very great talents into the service of our nation, and we appreciate it. And I just want to say that Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations. And the kinds of things that he's found and his people have found. He's brought a group of very smart people in, and they found things that are pretty unbelievable. I have to say that the numbers that we're talking about are substantial, but they're going to be very much more substantial with time, because many of the things that we're working on right now, we're going to have to remember Elon as we find them, but the numbers could double and triple because many things, we don't want to go out with them until we're sure, but we've found things that are unbelievably stupid and unbelievably bad. With the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon's delivered a colossal change in the old ways of doing business in Washington. Doge has installed geniuses with an engineering mindset and unbelievably talented people in computers. I actually asked Elon one time, what's their primary thing? And they have a lot of primary things, all having to do with being smart. But he said the thing that they're really the best at is working with computers, so that they can't be outsmarted by somebody that's not so honest, that happens to also be good with computers, but not as good as these people. But the mindset in the senior ranks of every federal department, and it's really changed. And with Elon's guidance, they're helping to detect fraud, slash waste, and modernize broken and outdated systems. So as you know, we're talking about various systems and changing systems. And, you know, sadly, it takes a long time to do that. You'll change, let's say, a system at IRS and computerize it properly, where the job can be done in 1/10 the time, but it takes sometimes years to rebuild those systems. But we've started, in many cases, I will say that this has less to do with Elon, but the air traffic control systems, we're bidding out to the best companies in the world, those systems right now. They were what the previous administration was horrible what they did. They spent billions and billions of dollars, and in the end, it didn't even come close to working. They tried to hook up wire to copper, and it can't be done. And they just spent billions of dollars and just wasted money. Actually made the system much worse. So we're going to get a brand new modern system. Congress is working with us on that, and we're going to get it done as quickly as we can. But it's in the works, and once it's done, it'll be good for 30 years. But we have a system that's 48 years old and would have a modern computer hooked into a very outdated computer, and they don't hook up. I mean, they didn't hook up. So after spending billions of dollars, they turned on the system, and in never any cases, from local to countrywide, they never worked. More than 75,000 bureaucrats have voluntarily left their taxpayer-funded jobs to come out and really do the job. Countless wasteful and unnecessary contracts have been terminated, and you know that we have terminated many contracts, and many contracts, Elon, are right now being looked at, and it may be 6 months, it may be almost a year in some cases. We're going through procedures, we're going through courts, and we'll remember you as we announce billions of dollars of extra waste, fraud, and abuse. Just as an example, Doge canceled $101 million for DEI contracts at the Department of Education, $101 million, and that was just in a small section of the Department of Education. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City, and the landlord never made the kind of money that he made in the last short period of time. $59 million to a hotel in New York City, $45 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion scholarships in Burma. In Burma, does anyone know about Burma? $42 million for social and behavioral change in Uganda. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. I can say it's $2 billion to Stacey Abrams and her environmental movement. There was $100 in the account, and all of a sudden they found $2 billion in the account. And I assume that's being looked at. I don't know, I'm not sure, but I assume that's being looked at. Think of that, $2 billion. And then Lee will tell you there's another one over there for $20 billion being spent on another environmental question. $20 billion, not 20 million, a lot, not 200,000, which is a lot. So think of it, in her case, you have $100, and now all of a sudden she gets hit with an infusion of $2 billion just before I take office. $20 million for Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. Nobody knows what that's all about. Nobody's been able to find it. $8 million for making mice transgender. So they spend $8 million on making mice transgender. And those are better than many of the others. I could sit here all day and read things just like that, but we have other things to do. So it's much more than just that. We're totally committed to making the Doge cuts permanent and stopping much more of the waste in the months to come. We want to get our great, big, beautiful bill finished and done. After that, we put some of this into the bill, but most of it's going to come later. We're going to have it cauterized by Congress, affirmed by Congress. In some cases, we'll make cuts. In some cases, we'll just use it in a different layer to save the money, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars. Doge has also fully modernized the federal retirement process and continues to work very hard on the IRS modernization, but we're taking that over with Doge. Many of the Doge people, Elon, are staying behind too, so they're not leaving. And Elon's really not leaving. He's going to be back and forth, I think. I have a feeling. It's his baby, and I think he's going to be doing a lot of things. But Elon's service to America has been without comparison in modern history. He's already running one of the most innovative car companies in the world. You look at his factories and compare them with some of the old factories we have, and it's a big difference. And the most successful space company, and I guess in history you would have to say the largest free speech platform on the internet, etc. Yet Elon willingly, with all of the success, he willingly accepted the outrageous abuse and slander and lies and attacks because he does love our country. I know that very much. He loves our country. He comes from another country, a country that's going through trials and tribulations, I would say. But he's all about the USA, and Americans owe him a great debt of gratitude. So I just want to thank Elon for his time as a special government employee. Can you imagine? They called him an employee, but it's a special government employee, and for coming and helping us, and he really has changed the mindset of a lot of people. A lot of people thought, maybe we'll cut 1% or 2% or 3%. Then they said, wow, we can cut a lot more than that. And we're going to do it very surgically. We're going to continue on the march. We're making America great again. When I was in Saudi Arabia, and we were in, as you know, 3 really great countries, predominantly the 3. Qatar was great, UAE was great, Saudi Arabia, incredible. Such an incredible experience to be in those 3 countries. But the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and I must tell you, the great leaders of the other 2 that we just mentioned, they all said the same thing, that the United States is the hottest country right now anywhere in the world. And 6 months ago, we thought it was dead. It was like a dead country. And it would have been a dead country if we didn't have the right result on November 5th. There would have been a horrible, horrible situation was going on with the borders, with transgender for everyone, men playing in women's sports, and so much more. But they were saying the hottest country anywhere in the world. And then I play that little clip because I was one person who's respected, but there were 2 people, because Joe was in that one too. Joe's a good man. But that was one group of people saying something about the success of what we've done over the last 4 months. They cannot believe it. In the one case, they said they've never seen anything like it as long as they've been doing what they've been doing. They've been doing it for a long time. So I want to thank Elon for helping. And again, the United States right now is the hottest country anywhere in the world. There's no country as hot, and we're doing really well. We came, when I left, we had no wars, we had no problems, we defeated ISIS, we rebuilt our military, and we had no inflation. And when I came back, we had a lot of inflation, we had wars all over the place. We had the embarrassment in Afghanistan where we gave up billions and billions of dollars of military equipment, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, I believe that strongly. We have Russia with Ukraine. We had the attack on Israel in October, the horrible attack, October 7th. Horrible, horrible attack. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And now we have something where we're really healing a lot of that. We stopped India and Pakistan from fighting. I believe that could have turned out into a nuclear disaster. And I want to thank the leaders of India, the leaders of Pakistan, and I want to thank my people also. We talked trade, and we said we can't trade with people that are shooting at each other and potentially using nuclear weapons. And they're great leaders in those countries, and they understood, and they agreed. And that all stopped, and we're stopping others from fighting also, because ultimately we can fight better than anybody. We have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest leaders in the world. We put one of them in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as you know, General Raisin Kane. And we wiped out ISIS, completely wiped out ISIS in 3 weeks. They said it would take 5 years, and we did it in 3 weeks. And that's the way it is, but we don't want to have to use our military. We want to be peace through strength when we can, and that's the way we're going to have it. So I just want to thank Elon and all of his people. Most of those people are staying, almost all of them are staying, and they're going to be with us. And you're going to see the results coming long into the future. Even a year and 2 years later, you're going to see a lot of the results, and those hundreds of billions of dollars are going to be adding up, and they're going to continue to add. It'll be interesting, really interesting to see what the final number is going to be. But again, Elon gave an incredible service. Nobody like him, and he had to go through the slings and the arrows, which is a shame because he's an incredible patriot. The good news is that 90% of the country knows that, and they appreciate it, and they really appreciate what he did. And I gave him a little special something we have here. Thank you. A very special that I give to very special people. I have given it to some, but it goes to very special people, and I thought I'd give it to Elon as a presentation from our country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elon.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you. You see the luck. The luck on this is amazing.
That's right. Large luck.
Well, let me say perhaps a few words that this is not the end of Doge, but really the beginning. My time as a special government employee necessarily had to end. It was a limited time thing. It's 134 days, I believe, which ends in a few days. So, so that it comes with a time limit. But the Doge team will only grow stronger over time. The Doge influence will only grow stronger. It's I liken it to sort of Buddhism. It's like a way of life. So it is permeating throughout the government. And I'm confident that over time we'll see $1 trillion of savings and a reduction in $1 trillion of waste and fraud reduction. The calculations of the Doge team thus far, in terms of an FY25 to FY26 delta, are over 160 billion, and that's climbing. We expect that number will probably go over 200 billion soon. So I think the Doge team is doing an incredible job. They're going to continue doing an incredible job, and I'll continue to be visiting here and be a friend and advisor to the president, and I look forward to time spent back in this amazing room. By the way, isn't this incredible? Look at this incredible. It's stunning. I think the way that the Oval Office, how the president has just completely redone the Oval Office is beautiful. I love the gold on the ceiling.
Thank you. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
That's been there a long time. That was plaster. Nobody ever really saw it. They didn't know the eagle was up there, and we highlighted. It's essentially it's a landmark, a great landmark, and that's 24 karat gold, and everybody loved it. And now they all see it when they come in. So it's been good.
The Oval Office finally has the majesty that it deserves, thanks to the president. So I look forward to continuing to be a friend and advisor to the president, continuing to support the Doge team. And we are relentlessly pursuing $8 trillion in waste and fraud reductions, which will benefit the American taxpayer. That's it, really. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, President Trump. The president mentioned that you had to deal with all the slings and arrows during your time at Doge. There's this.
Well, some of the people, some of the media organizations in this room were the slingers.
Well, so there is a New York Times report today that accuses you of blurring the line between.
Is the New York Times, is that the same publication that got a Pulitzer Prize for false reporting on the Russiagate? Is it the same organization?
I got to check my Pulitzer counter.
It is.
I think the judge just ruled against the New York Times for their lies about the Russiagate hoax, and that they might have to give back that Pulitzer Prize. That New York Times. Let's move on.
Okay, then
next
President
question.
Trump, I got one for President Trump. So President Trump, Biden aides who used to work here are in talks with Republicans in Congress who go and testify about what they did or didn't do to possibly conceal President Biden's decline. Do you think that Dr. Jill Biden should also have to come in and testify about what she did or didn't do?
Well, I hate the concept of it. It's the wife of a man who was going through a lot of problems, and everybody that dealt with him understood that. And I guess it came out during the debate loud and clear. That was the biggest signal of all. They have to do what's right. The country was, there was a lot of dishonesty in the election, as you know, of 2020. That's been now caught. People understand it. It was a rigged election. And when you go further out, when you see the auto pen, I mean, I think the auto pen is going to become one of the great scandals of all time, because you have somebody operating it or a number of people operating. Because I knew Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't in favor of opening up borders, letting 21 million people into this from prisons and mental institutions and gang members. He wasn't into that at all. And you know, who signed these orders, proclamations, and all of the different things that he signed that set our country so far back, that was so bad for our country?
With the auto pen, how would it work? Like, we're in the Oval Office right now. If there was a group of rogue staffers that worked for you who wanted to advance a bill or an executive order without your knowledge, how could they do it? How do they go
Well, it's very
behind the
hard, because
president's
I'd
back?
read your newspapers or your media the next day, and I'd say, well, I didn't approve that, and I would find it. I mean, they wouldn't get away with it for long, because they'd say, I never signed that. Who the hell signed that? Auto pens, to me, are used to sign letters to people, because we get, I think they said 20,000 letters a week, and you like to be able, when somebody takes the time to write a letter, it's nice to sort of write back. And auto pens are meant for that. Auto pens are not meant to sign major proclamations or tax cuts or borders, anything having to do with the border, which is so important. And if it happened on my watch, I would be able to see it, because the next day or sooner I'd be reading about something that I knew nothing about, and who the hell signed this? So I almost never used the auto pen. In fact, yesterday I was signing about 81, I think it was 81 proclamations and statements to people that I think should be signed by us. I think when you write letters to foreign dignitaries or presidents or prime ministers, you should be signing those letters, not done with auto pens. I understand he signed almost everything with an auto pen. It's a very dangerous thing. It really means you're not president. Whoever operated the auto pen, and we think we know who that is, and it was actually more than one person, but that's not what the presidency is all about. I hardly used to use it.
Are you going to reinstate the tariffs on China? You said that they violated the agreement with the U.S.
Well, they did. They violated a big part of the agreement we made. You know, if you read that whole statement, I was very nice to them. I helped them because they were in trouble with the stoppage of a massive amount of business. But I'm sure that I'll speak to President Xi, and hopefully we'll work that out. But yeah, there's a violation of the agreement. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you give us an update to the latest ceasefire agreement that Israel has agreed to, but Hamas is still considering?
Well, they're very close to an agreement on Gaza, and we'll let you know about it during the day or maybe tomorrow, and we have a chance of that. And I think we have a chance of making a deal with Iran also. They don't want to be blown up. They would rather make a deal, and I think that could happen in the not too distant future. That would be a great thing if we could have a deal without bombs being dropped all over the Middle East. That would be a very good thing. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We want them to be safe. We want them to have a very, very successful nation. Let it be a great nation, but we can't have them. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. And I think we're fairly close to a deal with Iran.
Mr. President, question for you on.
Yeah, please.
You said just now that you look forward to being a friend and advisor to the president. So do you expect to continue advising the president and Doge informally, or are you going to sort of shift your focus entirely to your companies?
Well, I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
I mean, yeah, I expect to remain a friend and an advisor, and certainly if there's anything the president wants me to do, I'm at the president's service.
Mr. Musk,
On Doge, you said that there was $1 trillion promise for cuts from Doge.
Yes, I think we do expect over time to achieve the $1 trillion.
But what have you found in your time here was the biggest roadblock to getting those cuts? Was it the cabinet, or was it Congress, or something else? What was the biggest roadblock from your work?
It's mostly just a lot of hard work. It's really not any one person or Congress. It's going through really millions of line items and saying just each one of them makes sense, or does not make sense. Obviously, at times when you cut expenses, those who are receiving the money, whether they're receiving that money legitimately or not, they do complain. And you're not going to hear someone confessing that they received money inappropriately. Never. They're going to always say that they received money appropriately for an important cause. Naturally, that's what you'd expect. So we just have to. It's just a lot of work going through the vast expenses of the federal government and just really asking questions. What's this money for? Are you sure it's actually being used well? Many times we can't even find anyone who defends it. So for a lot of the expenses, there is actually no defender at all. And then we have to just work through the process of stopping the spending, where there's often literally no defender. Nobody even knows why the money's being spent. It's truly absurd. I mean, we find situations where there are millions of software licenses with 0 people using them. 0. Exactly. This is the quizzical expression. You're like, surely, if there's millions of software licenses, someone should be using them. No, and then we've got to go through the process of saying, okay, look, if no one's using the software, we need to terminate this software license agreement. That's everywhere in the government.
Mr. Musk, what do you think would be easier, colonizing Mars or making the government efficient?
It's a tough call, but I think colonizing Mars and making life multi-planetary is harder. And as I said, we do expect to achieve over time the $1 trillion in savings. We can't do it in like a few months, but if you say by I think the official end of Doge, which the president may choose to extend, is the middle of next year. Say by the middle of next year, with the support of the president and Congress, could we achieve $1 trillion of savings? I think so. We're on track to do so.
Do you have faith that Congress is going to do it?
Thank you, Mr. President. You had mentioned earlier in the week that Doge had become a whipping boy, and as the president mentioned, you went through a lot to go through this process. Yes. Was it worth it for you, and what would you change?
Yes, so what we found was happening was that if there were any cuts anywhere, then people would assume that was done by Doge. And so we became like essentially the Doge boogeyman, where if any cut anywhere would be ascribed to Doge. A friend of mine's daughter, who's at law school at Georgetown, thought that Doge had cut the Senate, internships, the legal internships for the Senate, and we have nothing to do with that. So if they have been cut, it's not to do with us, just as an example. So, it just became a bit ridiculous where any cut anywhere was somehow Doge, and including things that made no sense, and we would agree made no sense. There are many things that occur in the government because it's the banal evil of bureaucracy. It's sort of the frankly largely uncaring nature of bureaucracy. It's as the great Milton Friedman said, money is spent most poorly when it is someone else's money being spent on people you don't know, and that's how federal spending is. And then you can't really even blame the individuals because the way the government works is complaint minimization. So when you do when someone within the government tries to stop that money being spent, there's usually someone that complains, and then their manager will say it's not worth the trouble, just pay it anyway. That happens over and over again.
So was it
I think it was an important thing. I think it was a necessary thing, and I think it will have a good effect in the future.
Thank you, President Trump. This week there was a video on board a plane that showed the First Lady of France slapping her husband, Emmanuel Macron. Do you have any world leader to world leader marital advice?
Make sure the door remains closed. That was not good. No, I spoke to him, and he's fine. They're fine. They're two really good people. I know them very well. And I don't know what that was all about, but I know them very well, and they're fine.
What do you think about this Democratic Party plan to avoid being swept in every battleground state again by spending $20 million to study how to speak to American men?
Well, you know, they spent 2.8 billion. We spent 1.5. We spent much less. We spent about half of what they spent, and at the end they were $28 million short. They had to be. They spent 2.8 billion. It's a lot, but they couldn't get 28 million at the end, and now they want to spend. I read that they want to spend money to learn how to talk. That's fake. You don't want to be fake. You shouldn't have to hire consultants to say what America needs, because then the consultants should be running the deal, not them. But I read that they want to spend a lot of money in each state. So we won all 7 swing states, 7 out of 7. We won a lot more than that. We won the popular vote. We won everything. And they want to spend money to find out what they did wrong. And I mean, I can tell you what they did wrong. I can tell you every one of their programs, when they say men playing in women's sports, I would say that's not a winner. When they say transgender for everybody, I think that's not a winner. When they say open borders so the entire world population of criminals can pour into our country, I don't think that's a winner. I mean, I just gave them that for free. But I don't know if they'll change their ways. I see them all the time. I see people that I know in Congress, Democrats, they're trying to justify some of the things I just said. You can't justify them. I always hear they're 80-20 issues. I say they're not 80-20, they're 97-3. They might be 99-1. They're not 80-20. They wish they were 80-20. And they're wasting a lot of money if they're going to continue with that nonsense.
And this one's a little bit more of a page 6 question, but back when you hosted The Apprentice, you mentioned once in 2012 that Diddy was a good friend of yours back then. He has since found himself in some very serious legal trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you ever consider pardoning him?
Well, nobody's asked. You had to be the one to ask, Peter, but nobody's asked. But I know people are thinking about it. I know they're thinking about it. I think some people have been very close to asking. First of all, I'd look at what's happening, and I haven't been watching it too closely, although it's certainly getting a lot of coverage. I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to him in years. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up. From what I read, I don't know. He didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. It's different. You become a much different person when you run for politics and you do what's right. I could do other things, and I'm sure he'd like me, and I'm sure other people would like me, but it wouldn't be as good for our country. As we said, our country's doing really well because of what we're doing. So it's not a popularity contest. So, I don't know. I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me.
Mr. President, on the Big Beautiful Bill, would you like to see the Senate build in some support for your tariffs on the Big Beautiful Bill, or should that be a standalone bill?
I have great support on the tariffs. I mean, I was so honored that we got that ridiculous stay lifted, because that would have taken away presidential power. It would have taken away everything that was granted by the founders. It would have been a terrible thing. And it would have, most importantly, would have left us vulnerable. We have a lot of countries that use tariffs on us and use them viciously, actually, viciously. And if we didn't have the power to use tariffs on them, and instantly, not when you go back to Congress and try and get hundreds of people to agree on something, that would take months to get just one simple proclamation. If we didn't have the power to counteract their powers, you wouldn't have a country left. We have to act fast. We have to be fast and nimble, as they say. And that was a really great moment, I think, yesterday when that stay was lifted. And hopefully now we'll go to court and just win that battle. Because if we don't have the power to do what they're doing to us, we are going to be a great nation no longer.
Elon Musk was once idolized by folks on the left in this country before joining your administration. Now he's considered a hero by conservatives. Why do you think this man, what he's done in American life, has been so politicized? Does it all
his life has been amazing. I mean, I look at so many different things. I look at that rocket being, guided back into position. I've never seen that before. I thought it was a space movie. I thought it was a movie. You look at what he's done in terms of communication, it's been unbelievable. So many different, even tunnels going underground, not having to go through all the process of going, he's got a company that does that. He's got so many different companies. Starlink, as an example, he saved a lot of lives, probably hundreds of lives in North Carolina. I don't even know if you remember, but I called you. They needed Starlink in North Carolina. And I didn't know what the hell Starlink was. I said, what is it? Who owns it? He said, do you know Elon Musk? I said, yeah, I happen to know the gentleman. This was before his government stay. And they said, we really need it because North Carolina was literally became an island. It was, people had no communication. They had no access to anything, and they were dying. And I called up Elon, and you can't get it because it's so successful. It's very hard to get. And he had so much of it brought over there, and they told me it was unbelievable. It saved a lot of lives. So, he's just done a lot of things. I don't think he gets credit for what he's done. But he's a very good person too. You know what? If he wasn't a good person, but he did the same things, I'd probably maybe speak differently. He happens to be a really good person who loves the country.
Mr. President, on the one big, beautiful bill, you had indicated this week that there were some things you didn't like about what had passed in the House. What changes do you want to see the Senate make? And you had also indicated there were things you didn't like about the bill. What would you be suggesting he push senators to change in their version?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll go first. It's an unbelievable bill. It cuts your deficits. It cuts, it's a huge cutting. But there's things I'd like to see maybe cut a little bit more. I'd like to see a bigger cut in taxes. It's going to be the largest tax decrease or cut in the history of our country. I'd like to see it get down to an even lower number. I was shooting for a slightly lower number. I would have liked to have done that. But with all of that being said, when you look at the tax cut and the fact that the original tax cut, which made us so successful, we had the most successful 4 years in the history of our country, the economy, and this is going to be even better. And you see that by the reports that came out just yesterday or tonight. I guess they were released this morning at 8 o'clock. You see the kind of numbers where somebody that's a pro is like, whoa, I haven't seen numbers like this since I've been doing this. These are human emotions of professionals that have never seen numbers like, and we've just started. The bill is a great bill. It's going to be jiggered around a little bit. It's going to be negotiated with the Senate, with the House. But the end result is it extends the Trump tax cuts. If it doesn't get approved, you'll have a 68% tax increase. You're going to go up 68%. That's a number that nobody's ever heard of before. You'll have a massive tax increase. If it does get approved, you'll have a large tax cut, the largest we've ever had. When you add the past tax cuts that we got you, the Trump tax, they call them the Trump tax cuts. It's an amazing bill. It does amazing things. With all of that, it's going to be adjusted a little bit over the next coming weeks, and I think it's going to be passed. The Republicans want to pass it. With all of the great things it does, including an extension of debt, it's the extension. We have to extend the debt. If we don't extend debt, we're in default. Now, the Democrats might like our country to be in default, but in 250 years, we've never been in default. That was handed to them by a very well-meaning man that gave it to them because he thought it was the right thing to do. It could have been their problem before the election, but this man thought it was the right thing to do, and he was well-meaning. I don't hold anything against him for that, but that was put on our plate when it should have been on the Democrats. September 28th, a famous date. It should have been taken care of by the Democrats, but this person, a man of power, gave it to us so that in June that comes due. Well, we have to take care of that because if we don't take care of it, we have a country in default, and we don't ever want to have a country in default. I'll tell you, a certain senator, Elizabeth Warren, said that she would never, ever allow a default on our debt. She would never let it happen, and she would like to get rid of the debt ceiling, what's called the debt ceiling. I call it the debt extension because we really need an extension, that she'd like to see that gotten rid of. And there are many people that agree. Many Democrats agree with that. But we gave that through, and I don't want to say an error. He did it well-meaning. They gave that to us. It was a Democrat problem. just before the election. Would have had a huge impact on the election. And to our benefit, we won anyway, but to our benefit. But felt that really for the good of the country, we should extend that. But Elizabeth Warren and various other people would like to see that, her whole career, she wanted to see it terminated, gotten rid of, not being voted on every 5 years or 10 years. And the reason was because it's so catastrophic for our country. And I always agreed with her. That was one thing I agreed with her on. Now, I haven't spoken to her, but I would say that if you asked her that question now, she'd say, no, it's their problem. But it's a very unfortunate situation. It's a very unfair situation. And she happened to be right on that. It should be gotten rid of, or it should simply be extended. But that's one of the things that gets taken care of in this bill. That automatically gets extended for a 4-year period, and it should be. But I agree with Elizabeth Warren on that. I think you should get rid of it. It's too catastrophic. Yeah, please, go ahead.
What message do you like to send to international students? Are they still welcomed to study in the United States? And one question for Mr. Musk.
The students? Well, we want to have great students here. We just don't want students that are causing trouble. We want to have students. I want to have foreign students. I think Harvard, it's close to 31%. That's a lot. Our country's given $5 billion plus to Harvard over a short period of time. Nobody knew that. We found that out. I wouldn't say that was a Doge thing, but we found that out over a period of time. That was sort of a Trump thing. We ended up in litigation for other reasons because they're very anti-Semitic. And in finding out and in going through the books, we found out that the country gave them $5 billion plus, much more than that, actually. And we're having it out with them, and let's see what happens. I think we have a very good, well, it's a very sad case. It's a case we win. We can't lose that case because we have the right to make grants. We're not going to make any grants like that. But I don't think Harvard's been acting very nicely. I think Columbia wants to get to the bottom of the problem. They've acted very well. And there are other institutions, too, that are acting, but Harvard's trying to be a big shot. And all that happens is every 3 days we find another $100 million that was given. 2 days ago, we found $200 million more. The money's given to them like gravy. I'd like to see the money go to trade schools, where people learn how to fix motors and engines, where people learn how to build rocket ships, because somebody has to build those rocket ships.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see trade schools set up, because you could take $5 billion plus hundreds of billions more, which is what's spent, and you could have the greatest trade school system anywhere in the world. And that's what we need, to build his rockets and robots and things that he's doing, and to build lots of other things. And I went to school with people. In some cases, they weren't good students, but they could fix the engine of a car better than anybody I've ever seen. They could take it apart blindfolded. They had an ability at that. And they did very well. They made a lot of money. It's a very skilled job. It's great. But I'd like to see a lot of money going into trade schools. I've always felt that. And we probably found our pot of gold, and that's what's been wasted at places like Harvard. And the money's been wasted. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I wanted to ask quickly, Mr. Musk, is your eye okay? What happened to your eye? I noticed there was a bruise there.
Well, it wasn't. I wasn't anywhere near France, so.
What does that mean?
No,
I didn't notice his
First Lady of France.
Getting slapped.
I didn't notice.
I was just horsing around with little X, and I said, "Go ahead, punch me in the face," and he did. Turns out, even a 5-year-old punching you in the face actually does.
That was X that did?
Yeah.
X could do it. If you knew X,
I saw his mom right now. But I didn't really feel much at the time, and then I guess it bruises up. But I just horsing around with the kids.
I didn't notice it, actually.
President Trump, I got one. I know that you try to stay pretty neutral because not your war, but
and by the way, not my war. I just want to solve the problem for people. This was not a war that was going to happen if I were president.
Right, and so not your war, but as you try to fix it, and as you survey this hellscape of the Ukrainian front lines,
it's horrible.
And you and your team deal with a very stubborn Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Do you look
and Zelensky?
Yeah. But do you look at this
very
conflict
Zelensky too.
any differently now? Like, do you look at this and see Putin as the good guy or the bad guy?
So, I've known him very well, and I went through a lot of things with him because Russia was, the Russia hoax turned out to be a total hoax. New York Times, they got a Pulitzer Prize. They have to give back the Pulitzer Prize. That's my lawsuit. And they're doing very poorly in that lawsuit. But, you know, they wrote stories about how it was true and it was false. And, you know, a lot of Washington Post also. I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending. We were going to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at, and I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way. With that being said, I'd like to see it end. 5,000 people, I think the number's even more than that, but 5,000 people a week are being killed. Mostly soldiers, but also people that live in little cities and towns throughout Ukraine. And I'd like to see that stop.
And I asked Caroline this yesterday, but I want to ask you directly. So many of the things that you're trying to do are held up in court right now. If the courts are going to have so much influence over U.S. policy, do you wish you would have just become a judge instead?
Yeah, well, look, it wasn't meant to be that way. If you look at the founders, the president had certain powers, and you have your three groups, and they all had supposed to be pretty equal powers. But you can't have a judge in Boston running foreign policy in places all over the country because he's got a liberal bent or he's a radical left person. That's what the executive branch is for. And you have checks and balances. But we had millions of people pour into our country. Many, many criminals poured into our country. Murderers, mental institutions from all over the world being emptied out into our country. And if we don't get them out and get them out quickly, we're could lose your country very easily. This is a bad, that anybody would allow this to happen to our country. You know, with all of the things, we took over inflation, we took over some wars, we took over a lot of problems that didn't exist when I was president. None of it existed. We wiped out ISIS. Other than that, we had no wars. Putin was never going to hit Ukraine. Israel would have never been attacked. That attack, as you know, Iran had no money. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. They had no money whatsoever. That wasn't going to happen. All of these things that happened weren't going to happen. You wouldn't have had inflation. So it's very sad when I came back. But the thing that is the hardest is that they allowed 21 million people into our country, and many of those people are stone-cold criminals. They moved their criminal population into the United States, and of all the things that, you know, are bad, I solved inflation, I believe, already. I got the fuel prices down. The fuel prices came down. That's one of the reasons. They screwed up the energy. They screwed up the cost of gasoline and oil and gas. And you had tremendous inflation, the greatest inflation probably in the history of our country under Biden. And when people said, oh, but the economy was, no, the economy was terrible for the people because they couldn't afford the energy. And the energy brought everything else up. Energy is the big deal. But with all of that, we solved that already. In 4 months, we solved it. $1.99, $1.98 gasoline. First time people have seen that in a long time since my term. But the hardest thing to solve is millions of people pouring into our country, many of whom are criminals. Because remember, these countries are smart. Their leaders are very street smart. They're sending the people that they don't want. They don't want the people that are there, that are law-abiding, that are productive, that are working hard. They want people that are in jails. We have them. They allow them to come in. And I always look to the other side, like, why would somebody do something? You know, in business, I try and study, why would they want to do this? Why would they want to sell it? Why would they want to buy it? One thing I can't figure out is what would an administration, what were they thinking when they allowed millions of people from prisons all over the world, not just from South America, Venezuela, all over the world, from the Congo in Africa, hundreds of people, thousands of people from the Congo, rough prisoners, from Asia, from Europe, rough parts of Europe. Why would they allow them to come into our country? Why would they do that? It's the one thing I can't figure out. And I don't believe it was Joe Biden. I really don't. I mean, look, he's been a sort of a moderate person over his lifetime, not a smart person, but a somewhat vicious person, I will say. If you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry because he's vicious. What he did with his political opponent and all of the people that he hurt a lot of people, Biden. And so I really don't feel sorry for him, but he wasn't a person that would allow murderers to come into our country. He wasn't a person that was in favor of transgender for anybody that wanted it, take kids out of families, et cetera, et cetera. So I just don't understand why a thing like this, how a thing like this could have been allowed to happen. Very sad. It's very sad. Very sad for our country.
I think the fundamental moral flaw of the left is empathy for the criminals and not empathy for the victims. Empathy for the criminals, but not empathy for the victims. And there's been way too much of that. That needs to stop. To the president's point, there's been immense judicial overreach that is unconstitutional. That was never intended. And it's undermining the people's faith in the legal system. It needs to stop. It's gone too far.
Mr. And just today, we had, just a couple of hours ago, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court, thank goodness, that was very important. We had two important decisions yesterday on the tariffs because, again, we have to be able to fight a fair fight with other countries. Howard, would you say? We have to be able to use tariffs to fight people that use tariffs on us. I mean, if we didn't have that power of tariffs, we would economically be destroyed as a country because they will destroy us. Other countries will destroy us with unchecked tariffs. We can check them when we have the use. They tried to take that power away from us. And if you take that power away, we're not going to have a country. We won't have an economically viable country. But it's very important on immigration that we be able to get people out without having to go through a long court case. I mean, it was up to some of these judges. Every single one of these millions of people, criminals, prisoners that were let go from jails because they save a fortune when they do. They brought them into the United States. You know what they're saving? The money they're saving? But some of murders, it's very important that we're able to get those people out of here fast, bring them back to their country where they belong. And those countries take them, because if they don't take them, they have to go through the wrath of the United States, and they take them. But we have judges that don't want that to happen, and it's a terrible thing. That's going through the court system right now, that whole situation. But when ICE and with Border Patrol, they've done an incredible job. When they do this incredible job, and they capture 100 killers and drug dealers, and we can't keep them for years here as we go through trials. We have to get them out rapidly, and we know who they are. And we're very careful about who they are, but we have to get them out rapidly, or again, we're not going to have a country, okay? Maybe one or two more. Go ahead.
Are you concerned that tariff may also affect companies like Tesla, which has parts manufactured abroad? And this is also to you, Mr. Musk.
Well, he's going to end up building his whole car here. I mean, I thought he built his whole car. Pretty much he does. He's got incredible factories, and like I looked at one in Texas. It's unbelievable. No, all of the manufacturers will build their parts here too. I mean, it used to bother me. They make a part in Canada, a part in Mexico, a part in Europe, and it's sent all over the place, and nobody knew what the hell was happening. I think it's ridiculous. You build a car, make it in America, and I gave them a little leeway on that. Gave them some leeway. But over the next year, they've got to have the whole thing built in America. That's what we want. We want America to buy American-built cars. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
Good meeting. It was a good meeting.
Are you considering? Thanks, guys. Keep going. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody, you are listening to President Trump from the Oval Office. A very good afternoon. I'm Carol Masser, along with Jess Metton, in for Tim Stenovic on this Friday edition of Bloomberg Business Week Daily. It's a busy one. It's not a quiet one. And the president has been speaking for about 50 minutes. Next to him in the Oval Office, of course, has been Elon Musk. It's kind of a farewell to Elon, although Elon specifically saying that he will still be very much much involved. We did also see the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, next to the desk as well, and next to Elon, along with the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. A lot to get to. We want to bring in Max Chafkin, senior reporter at Bloomberg Business Week, co-host of the Everybody's Business and Elon Inc. podcast, so much more, a very close follower of all things. Elon, you've been listening along with us. Elon kind of not leaving, though.
No, not leaving. And you know, I think those of us who follow this closely kind of expected this to some extent. I mean, Trump signaled it last night in his post on Truth Social. Also, you know, for all this talk of Elon getting pushed out or making his exit, we've seen those headlines. There have sure been a lot of events at the White House or at Trump-related things over the last month. They brought up the presidential travel, Musk joining Trump on this tour in the Middle East. We've also seen these kind of valedictory, this isn't even the first valedictory kind of appearance. There was a cabinet meeting, I believe, last month. The thing is, Trump needs Elon Musk. The Republicans need Elon Musk. He was the biggest donor to Republican candidates or Republican campaigns in the 2024 cycle. They are certainly counting on him in the 2026 cycle. And having him on side, having him a part of this, having this show of unity is helpful to the president in helping to bring Republican members of Congress around to, you know, to pass the big, beautiful bill or anything else. You know, on the other hand, Musk also needs Trump, right? For all the reasons that made him an enthusiastic supporter of Donald Trump. I mean, SpaceX is a large government contractor. Tesla is a highly regulated company. It goes on and on. Having this close relationship is very valuable. So I think it's in both their interests to keep this going. It is clear, though, that Elon Musk's kind of connection to Doge, and I think to a greater extent, the kind of prominence of Doge, the vision of Doge as this kind of Elon Musk-driven, maximalist, frenetic, getting in there and breaking stuff, that feels like it's sunsetting.
And to be fair, there have been numbers put out by the administration and others about, you know, I think Elon specifically said that he still expects to hit that, I think, $1 trillion in cuts over the years or something, some large numbers.
Yeah.
But the point is, everybody's done a lot of reporting, including Bloomberg, that really questions some of the numbers that have been out there and what ultimately they will achieve in terms of cuts.
Yeah, well, and even if you take what he said, right, it's $1 trillion over an undefined time period.
Right.
Big difference from where Elon Musk was, you know, during the campaign when during an event with Howard Lutnick, he said $2 trillion a year. That was then downgraded to $1 trillion. And so, you know, by his own admission, and I think anyone who was familiar with the working of the federal government could have told him this. There were experts certainly at the time saying this is going to be very hard. You know, that was probably an unrealistic goal. Of course, Elon Musk is all about unrealistic goals, right? That's kind of his thing. He even by his own account, you know, likes to set these audacious goals, you know, even if you fall short, even if you're a little late, it's still impressive.
Even if you get a black eye from your 5-year-old son.
He's going to argue that, you know, 160 billion, which is the claimed figure, is significant. It's not a small number. It's just so far off from where they were. And when you look at, you know, the deficit projections from this latest spending bill, right, not a huge number.
And Musk even pointed out that he wants to focus more on his businesses. I mean, if you're looking at Tesla's stock down close to 13% year to date, but Trump said himself that Musk will be back and forth. So how would shareholders and investors in his companies feel about this?
Elon Musk is walking a line here, and there's even sort of some kind of contradictions within the movements of the share price, because of course the stock went crazy up after Trump was elected. The story we heard back then was, well, the stock is going up because Elon Musk is going to have all this access. And then we reached a point where the stock went up, started trading up because Elon Musk said he was stepping away. Now, I think the truth is Tesla investors are very much on board with pretty much whatever Elon Musk says. They believe that this is a shareholder base that is different from most publicly traded companies. There is a level of belief in the CEO that is greater than a normal company. They are trusting that Elon Musk can walk a line, that he can simultaneously focus on all these companies. He's running 5 companies at the same time while maintaining his role, as we heard just now, as an advisor. I mean, there was a little bit of a shift there. You heard a question about, is he going to be involved 24/7 with his companies? It was a claim that Elon Musk made on Twitter just a few days ago. Elon Musk didn't respond to that directly, but he did say, I will continue to be an advisor and a friend. I hear that, and I think this is, this relationship, as we heard from the president and from Elon Musk, it will continue.
Really fascinating stuff, Max. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Max Chafkin, senior reporter at Bloomberg Businessweek, co-host of the Everybody's Business and Elon Inc. podcast. Check it out because they really do follow the day-to-day gyrations of all things Elon. Hey, listen, also listening in on that press conference is our own Josh Wingrove, normally in D.C., but we find him in Pennsylvania on this Friday. We'll explain that in just a moment. But Josh, want to bring you in because you were listening. What stood out for you among the comments from the president and Elon Musk as well?
Yeah, I mean, what's clear is that there's going to be an ongoing relationship between the two. Testing to it, Howard Lutnick saying the same thing last night. So Mr. Musk is gone, but not really gone, if you will forgive me for that sort of double speak. What's also clear is that the target of savings that they were talking about is absolutely not materializing, or at least is not materialized yet. Remember, it wasn't even $1 trillion. He was talking about $2 trillion when Elon Musk made that initial commitment back in Madison Square Garden on the campaign trail. That has come down substantially from that. Now $1 trillion, and they're not near that either in their stated numbers and certainly much less in their posted numbers. So the savings that they're finding are much more modest than they wanted, and there are sort of ongoing questions about what Doge will look like, not only with the departure of Mr. Musk, but with his number 2 as well, reportedly.
And Josh, of course, you are in Pennsylvania, like Carol mentioned, ahead of Trump's expected remarks on this partnership announcement when you're talking about Nippon Steel, as well as U.S. Steel. What are you expecting to hear from Trump later on this afternoon about this?
Well, as we know, Trump announced about a week ago the planned partnership. We've been waiting on details on that, and our reporting earlier this week was that talks were ongoing. It's a big question mark right now hanging over the status of those talks, including what specific provisions on American control, whether the U.S. will have control over a certain number of board seats. We're waiting for details on all that. But behind me, you may see a sign that says a golden age. There are signs that say make USS great again, or U.S. Steel great again, of course, the president's slogan. So Trump seems on board. The White House has been referring to it as a deal this week. So, the stock is trading pretty much near the offer price of $55. So most people seem to think that this is all but baked, but we really are missing some key details, including on whether that quote-unquote golden share that Senator David McCormick of Pennsylvania talked about would ultimately come through, and if that's an equity stake or not. I'll show you, I don't know if you guys can see, but this is the situation. They're handing these out here. So I think it gives you a sense of the president's mood heading into this event.
There are so many questions. Partnership, deal, golden shares. Josh, just got about 45, 50 seconds left. I'm looking at you, this background. It looks like, the campaign trail again. It's really kind of wild. So what is this moment for the president?
Yeah, this is absolutely a rally setup, campaign-style event. So we're going to see him, really flip. Remember, he campaigned against this deal during the election campaign, but there's been a lot of pressure for him to reverse course, including from Republicans, one who's standing next to me on another network, talking about why they made that choice. So Trump is sort of, now on board with the deal. 2 changes he'll tout. Increased investment. Nippon Steel reportedly pledging $14 billion instead of $2.7, their initial pledge of additional investment on top of the purchase price. And secondly, Trump is claiming American control because of those mitigation provisions. We just don't know what those are yet, so it's tough to say, but it looks like it'll be, Japanese control. Senator McCormick has said U.S. Steel will remain in the ownership profile of Nippon Steel. In other words, the Japanese will own it, but the Americans will remain, with some levers of control.
All right, looking forward to it. We're going to be all over it, as you are as well. Josh Wingrove, thank you so much. Certainly a noisy setting there in Pennsylvania, but they'll be curious to see what the president has to say about the deal and get the particulars. All right, folks, this was largely a D.C. hour, no doubt about it. Lots more to come on Bloomberg Business Week with Jess and myself. If you're watching on TV, the close is coming your way in just a moment. Do not go anywhere, though. Bloomberg Business Week Daily continues on this Friday.
big league pitcher has hired round-the-clock security for his family. Here's correspondent Steve Kathan.
Houston Astros pitcher Lance McCullers Jr. has been outspoken about online death threats he's received.
Threatening to find my kids and murder them is a little bit tough.
He's now hired private security for his family. Boston pitcher Liam Hendricks has been among others targeted too. Some have cited the cancer survivor's health. Police in Major League Baseball are investigating. Milwaukee's Christian Yelich says over the past few years, abuse from fans has definitely increased, some of it over lost bets. Steve Kathan, CBS News.
The American Cancer Society estimates there are about 18 million cancer survivors in this country, and that number could grow to 22 million over 10 years. Currently, about half of all survivors were diagnosed in the past 10 years. 4 out of 5 are 60 or older. I'm Cammie McCormick, CBS News.
The Peace Lily This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily, with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, everybody, we are just about 55 minutes away from the closing bell on this Friday, getting ready to wrap up the trading day and the trading week. Tim is out today. Jess Metten, Bloomberg News Deputy Team Leader for U.S. Equities, is in the house. And bouncing around, we're pretty much at our best levels of the session, Jess. And it looks like, I actually think stocks took a leg up when President Trump in the Oval Office, he just wrapped up some comments, made some comments about thinking we can work things out with China because U.S.-China trade tensions, again, have weighed on the trade today.
And even though it seems more like kind of a blah day in trading, last trading session of May, still overall, the S&P 500 up about 5.8% this month. So that would be on pace for its best May since the 1990s,
All right,
to put
so
that in perspective.
Good month, even if things feel a little blah. All right, we're going to talk about the trade. We're going to talk about today's economic data in just a moment. We're going to talk about the return of spheres of influence, kind of the next carving up or potential carving up geopolitically of our world. And then a little bit later on in our 4 o'clock hour, we're going to talk with Ayesha Curry. Yeah, you know the name, Steph Curry's wife, but she is doing so many different things in food, in philanthropy, in publishing. So we're going to get into that a little bit later on. But let's get to the trade because, folks, we're pretty much at our best levels of the session, at least on the S&P, it looks like. Here's Charlie Powell.
Hi, thank you very much. Indeed, the S&P now lower by 5 points, down under 0.1%. The Dow solidly in the green as we wrap up the trading month of May. Minutes to go here, 54 to be precise, up 76 points right now. That is a gain of 0.2%. We've got the Dow down 97, a decline on the Dow Industrials now of 0.5%. Our Mag 7 index down 0.9% with a 10-year 4.42%, the 2-year 3.91%. Spot gold down $23 the ounce, right now down 0.7%. Gold $32.94 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude $60.71 a barrel. WTI down 0.4%. And Bitcoin now lower by 1.3%, 104,797 on Bitcoin. Bottom line here, we are just about to wrap up the best May since 1990 with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all trading mixed right now. We got more on the markets for you coming up in just a moment. A notable declining stock today, Gap. It is plunging 19.2% after the apparel firm predicted a tariff impact of as much as $300 million and revealed stubborn weakness at 2 of its smaller brands, Banana Republic and Athleta. Again, Gap shares, they're down now by 19.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Man, that's sticking with me, Jess. Best May since 1990. You highlighted. That's pretty impressive.
Right. It's actually rivaling, depending on where the close, it's either going to be 1990 or 1997.
Still
so we'll have to make it till 4 p.m. to see what the final tally is.
Can I say this? Were you born?
Yes, believe it or not. Well, actually, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I was born before the 90s.
I'm just saying, like a little perspective. I just just reminds me.
No, I was around.
Young, but I mean,
I was young, but I was around.
All right. Let's get to some of what we got today. Reads, I definitely was around. Reads on confidence and sentiment today. There are data points too on kind of where we get reads on actual activity, what people are doing in terms of spending or not spending. We did get U.S. consumers hitting the brakes when it comes to spending. We got that this morning. Goods imports sank by a record, and U.S. consumer sentiment rebounded in late May from one of the lowest readings on record. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's get to our eco and trading roundup. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. No, it's okay. Bloomberg Economics U.S. economist Stuart Paul is in the house, along with Bloomberg News senior editor, Equities America's Eric Weiner, both in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Eric, I want to start. Stuart, I want to start with you. The eco data, I think, is important to get an idea of what are the fundamentals behind our economy right now.
Yeah. So we got the.
Eric, you were like, don't ask me if I was born. Sorry, open mouth, insert foot. Okay, Stuart, take it away.
So this morning we got the April Personal Income and Outlays Report, which includes PCE inflation. Core PCE inflation is the Fed's preferred price gauge. So it's important when we think about monetary policy and whether the Fed is going to resume rate cuts in the months ahead. What we ended up seeing is that there was more pass-through from tariffs in April into PCE prices than I think even the Fed was anticipating, certainly more than the White House was anticipating. Goods prices rose pretty materially, services prices retreated, and we saw a shifting of consumer spending based on where they're feeling the pinch in terms of prices. There was a major retreat in spending on goods, where there was pass-through from tariffs, and there was a bit more of an increase on services, which are now relatively cheaper. The thing to keep in mind in the inflation landscape going forward is that there was major drag exerted on the April inflation print from financial services prices. And financial services prices move with a lag, but they move with equity markets. And so the sell-off that we saw in equities earlier this year, the past few months, and that we now see reversing with the best May since the 90s, is just going to result in additional inflation in the months ahead. So even though the headline figures for inflation were relatively good, we are seeing inflation pass through, and we're likely to see an uptick in services inflation coming down the pipe.
I want to bring Eric in the conversation, not just because he's my editor, but in working on one of my stories running this weekend.
Because he is your editor.
To get the read through for equities, because from a trading perspective, how do they synthesize the economic data and then try to make trades off of this going into the summer?
Well, to Stuart's point, everybody's really aware of the lag. And the lag can last even longer. I mean, if you look at the last Trump administration, there was a significant lag of when the tariffs went on and then when we started feeling it. So the idea that we're moving into something that is certain is wrong. We're moving into more uncertainty. There's less clarity in the market right now than there's been at any time, because we are starting to see some of this stuff drift in, but we don't have the full picture. So you're kind of guessing. To the extent the way you trade this is, it appears staples are moving well, defensive stuff is moving well.
Dividend pairs.
Yeah, but consumer discretionary is pretty scary. And then the question becomes, what happens with, say, travel in the summer? And what happens with, the services point is a great one. We tend to focus on the goods, but we do a lot with services. And if you look at that and the prices of them just starting to go up, that will be a major area where people will cut back.
Well, and I want to go back to, because the president started his press conference, news conference from the White House, Oval Office, talking about inflation and highlighting a competitor's networks, saying that inflation, like they brought inflation down. Your point is that, hold on, everybody. Like, we're going to see what happens, certainly, in future data points.
That's right. Inflation risk is definitely skewed to the upside. Pipeline price pressures have been mounting. You can see that when you look in PMIs and different survey data. And when you look at the distribution of price increases throughout the economy, you do see the inflation pressures coming from tariffs. What matters is how consumers end up responding to those changes in prices and in relative prices. Going to pull back on spending on goods, may spend a little bit more on services. The question is, to some extent, whether, as we get into the summer travel season, for example, whether the rotation of domestic consumers into more discretionary services can offset the retreat in spending on U.S. services coming from abroad. For example, there's been a lot of cancellations of travel into the U.S. from abroad. And for that reason, we think that that's one of the explanations why there's going to be relatively little hiring in the May jobs report. We're expecting just 90,000 jobs added, in large part because of a pullback in leisure and hospitality hiring, which had been one of the bright spots. But when you see that pullback in leisure and hospitality hiring, it's because firms are anticipating exactly what Eric was talking about, a little bit of weak demand, especially in some of the discretionary services, some of those affected by policy, including weak travel from abroad.
And I'm glad you brought that up because consumer discretionary is actually the worst performing sector year to date, to Eric's point. But then on the flip side, industrials
down 6%.
are the best ones when you're thinking about how closely tied they are to the economy. So when you're working with reporters, especially when they're doing earnings related stories and how CEOs are viewing the trajectory, what are you seeing?
Well, CEOs are about as pessimistic as they've ever been, or as they've been in a very long time. And it's hard to gauge that because if you're in a period like this, it makes sense to talk down your results and to minimize expectations so you don't get burnt on the other end.
You're kind of given like an option to do that, right, in this environment.
You've got some runway to do that. However, and this gets to the China point, you don't know what your input costs are going to be. Like if you're the big industrials, they've done well, and some of that is a pull forward of activity that's been going on where people were trying to rush in before things hit. But at the same time, if you're building a complex product and it has parts coming from all over the place and you don't exactly know what each of those parts is going to cost, it makes it much more difficult for you to identify what the widget at the end of it is going to cost and then what your margin will be and what you can charge because you don't know what the consumer will pay. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there if you're trying to manage through this.
I know when we were at Milken on the West Coast, I mean, we were talking with a bunch of big developers, and they're like, you're going to think twice before doing some construction because there's so many pieces that come from overseas, and you're not going to start a project until you make sure you have everything. All right, we've got about a minute left here. So, I don't know, Stuart, this moment in time on Friday, kind of our environment, what's changed? I mean, are we just still kind of waiting until we get some resolution with all the trade and tariff stuff?
I think for a long time we've had a lot of uncertainty about trade policy. We've started to see a little bit of bright spots in terms of tariffs being paused. Over the last several months, everyone has just pointed to really solid hard data. But I think that we're starting to see cracks in the hard data. Okay. I think that we're seeing weak inflation because consumers are pulling back on spending on goods where they're feeling some price pressures. I think that we're going to see weak services spending, and I think that the cracks in the labor market are going to continue widening. We'll see more of that next week.
What do those cracks mean for investors?
It means that it's very hard to game this market. And you also have to keep in mind that the last time, the estimates are 12 to 18 months before tariffs actually filter through. So we really don't have a great gauge on where things stand.
Okay. Which could mean, though, if ultimately, bottom line, we have a higher tariff environment, which we are going to at some level. There's going to be an impact.
It's demand destructive.
Yeah. All right. Bummers. Thanks, guys. All right, we're going to leave it there. Have a great weekend. Bloomberg Economics U.S. economist Stuart Paul and Bloomberg News senior editor Equities America's Eric Weiner in our studio. Hey, coming up next, a recent article from Foreign Affairs about carving up the world. We talk geopolitics.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We are looking at a loss of just 1 point right now on the S&P 500 index. A little change there. We got 39 minutes to go until we wrap up the trading month of May. The Dow now higher by 97 points. That is a gain of 0.2%. While NASDAQ is down 81 for the NASDAQ Composite Index, a drop there of 0.4%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 Index does remain lower, trading down now by about 0.9%. The 10-year, 4.41%. The 2-year, 3.90%. Gold down $24 the ounce, down 0.7%. 32.93 right now on the precious metal, while West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.5%, 60.64 a barrel. And this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by ShipStation. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Use code Bloomberg for a free trial at ShipStation.com. That's ShipStation.com with the code Bloomberg. So we are only minutes to go until we wrap up the trading month of May. On to the trading month of June. Ethan Devitt is Chief Global Market Strategist of Meta, and she was a guest this morning on Bloomberg Surveillance. We asked her what to expect as we head into the new trading month.
I think we're going to see a continuation of this type of volatility. We're obviously going to see getting close to drop-dead dates on some of these tariff renegotiations. We'll see how the negotiations actually play out. We're going to see more and more clarity in terms of the actual impact of tariffs on prices. We've only seen really sporadic clarity up to now.
Ethan Devitt of Moneta interviewed on Bloomberg Surveillance. Palantir shares up by 4.5%, putting the stock on track for a record close after the Trump administration reported, the New York Times reported that the Trump administration has expanded the data analysis software company's work across the federal government in recent months. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Jess Metten in for Tim Stenovec live here on this Friday. Hey, listen, we did hear from President Trump just from the Oval Office. He did say he expected to speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping after accusing China of violating an agreement with the United States to ease tariffs. So we did see kind of a ratcheting up of tensions between the world's two largest economies. That was initially putting pressure on some of the trade, but it did seem that some of that eased as we did hear a comment out of the White House saying that he expected to actually speak to the Chinese president. But I have to say, geopolitically, so much going on. We've got the strained and evolving U.S.-China relationship, the Russia-Ukraine war, how that may end, when it will end, the Middle East, Israel and Hamas, Greenland, and more. Everyone is kind of looking at maybe what is the new global world order going forward. And 80 years later, it's hard not to wonder if the world is really kind of headed toward another Yalta Conference and a carving up of our world. Our next guest actually wrote about it for Foreign Affairs magazine. It caught our attention. It's great to have with us Monica Tufts. She's professor of international politics at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. She's taught at Oxford University's Blavatnik School of Government, Harvard University's JFK School of Government, and she spent 4 years in the U.S. Army as a Russian linguist. And she joins us from Medford, Massachusetts. Monica, great to have you here with us. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thanks for having me, Carol and Jess.
Well, it's good to have you here. There's so much coming at us domestically, but also continually geopolitically. The president just talking about various parts of the world, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's about China and trade, just from the Oval Office. Is the world about to be carved up in a new way, just like we saw after World War II?
It's a question still. I think we have to watch it. I did write this piece, and it's a speculative piece in the sense of using history, basically, of looking at prior history to try to understand what's happening. We do seem to be in a liminal moment right now where you have leaders who are talking about expansive aims. And when I talk about expansive aims, it's not only economically, but it's politically. So you have President Trump coming in and talking about Greenland. Maybe it would be nice for Greenland to be part of the United States, Canada, and then taking control over the Panama Canal. And then you have Russian President Vladimir Putin actually going in and taking Crimea and then 4 other provinces. And then, of course, we know China's President Xi would love to reacquire Taiwan. And they seem to be in a position right now politically to be able to talk about this in, this kind of language of expanding their nations geographically. And each of them seems to have sort of ideas that this is somewhat desirable. So the question is whether they succeed, right? Putin is not succeeding right now. China has not made a play for Taiwan. And President Trump, it's not clear that he has the capacity or the full desire to take Greenland, Canada. So it's a question mark still.
Well, this concept of, Professor Toft, of spheres of influence or sphere of influence, not a new one, it's been around. They change, right? So is it, I don't know, if we think about a new carving up, is it a good thing or a bad thing or TBD?
I think it depends upon your perspective. So for the states that have managed to, and the statesmen that managed to, establish a new sphere of influence, it could be a good thing. But for the states that are sort of gobbled up within that sphere, it's not such a great thing, because basically those larger countries, what they're doing is they're using their advantages in military power, military might, economic leverage, and diplomacy, right, to secure those spheres of influence, get control of those geographic areas in order to exert more control economically and militarily without necessarily exercising formal sovereignty. And the question is over time, are they benign? So do they do good, right? Will they help develop the countries that they sort of move into? Or are they malign? Are they repressive? Generally speaking, when we were living in the world between 1945 and let's say 1991 during the Cold War period, we had the liberal West, right? And that was one bloc, and that was our sphere with Western Europe. And then you had this sort of Warsaw Pact. And within the Warsaw Pact, that was considered the Soviet Union sphere. And it didn't go so well for the East Europeans, which is why today, or in the post-1990 period, the post-Cold War period, many of those Eastern European countries try to get into the Western side, right? Into the Western sphere. And the United States was the great stabilizer. What's kind of tossed this all up in the air at this point is two things. The first factor is Russian President Vladimir Putin going into Ukraine and actually using force to do that. And then secondarily, you now have a U.S. president talking in these expansive terms about possibly expanding United States territory. So it does seem to be a situation where there is change, afloat, and whether it's a good or bad thing, I think we need to suspend judgment. But I will tell you, it tends not to be a good thing. In fact, I could have, titled the piece "Fears of War," right? Because what happens is you get up into those buffer areas between where the different spheres rub up against one another, and who gets to control what part. How deep do you go into each other's sphere of influence?
How does China play into this?
It's a great question. And the thing is if you think about President Xi, he's very conservative in his movements, right? Basically, President Xi wants to keep the Chinese economy humming, right? So he has to keep the middle class happy, keep the jobs, make sure that the real estate market doesn't collapse. And so for him, the economy is everything, because it's the legitimacy on which the Communist Party and President Xi built his power. On the other hand, you have this thing looming in the background, which is nationalism. And Chinese, just like the Americans, there's nationalism. And they believe that Taiwan is part of Chinese territory. And when you've got another major power, the United States, supporting Taiwan, which the Chinese see as theirs, that leads to tensions. And so the Chinese, on the one hand, under President Xi, recognize that war is very costly, right? We understand that war can be quite costly. Yet, on the other hand, there's these impulses that they need to expand economically. Oh, and by the way, politically, in terms of nationalism, it would be nice to reacquire some territories that they see as rightfully their own.
We are talking with Monica Toft. She's professor of international politics at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. We're talking about an article that she has written for Foreign Affairs entitled "The Return of Spheres of Influence." Monica, Professor Toft, I want to relate it to the Bloomberg audience. And I think about every story, there is, I feel like, a money component to it, right? A market component, an economic component. So if indeed we are seeing up a new carving up, and as you said, it depends on kind of how it gets carved up, but should we assume that there are implications then for financial markets, for economies? And I do think about this U.S. exceptionalism where it seems to be waning. We're talking about that a lot more today than at the beginning of the year, January 1st, when we talked about U.S. exceptionalism reigning supreme, and that applied to financial markets.
Yeah, I mean, it does matter quite a bit for the economy and for trade and for U.S. exceptionalism. And I think what's happening under the Trump administration is they're sort of tossing that exceptionalism further up in the air, right? So you know, we do have sort of now competing powers. China has risen economically, and what's so interesting about the Chinese case is the United States helped that through the 1990s and early 2000s until all of a sudden we have the crisis in 2008, and China, and actually both China under Xi and Russian President Putin, look at that 2008 crisis and think, maybe that Western capitalism isn't so great. Maybe the American dollar isn't as secure as we thought it was. And so you started seeing sort of the decoupling and trying to sort of vary out and diversify their economies a little bit more. So economics is absolutely critical to this story. But I think, you know, it's interesting. I'm now, you know, talking to people about political risk. It used to be geoeconomic risk.
Right.
And now people are thinking, wow, politics really matter. And I'm thinking, of course they do. I'm a political scientist by training.
Right.
But when you have leaders making major decisions about tariffs and trade and who the rival is, right, then you're going to have changes in the economic markets.
We only have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you, if indeed, when we see some end to the Russia-Ukraine war, if Ukraine has to give back or let go of some territory, and that is certainly seen as another win in terms of President Putin expanding his territory again after that initial annexation of Crimea, that sends a very big message, right, to the world in terms of great powers being able to take land.
Yes, what it does is it validates the use of force, right? So it basically says if you use force, then potentially you're going to be able to keep the territory that you have actually conquested and now occupy. But you know what I want to do is I'd love for the audience to think about sort of extending their time horizon. So in the shorter term or the medium term, it may be the case that Ukraine may have to modify some of its territorial, you know, construct, right? The nature and the size of the state. But over the longer term, you know, Putin is not going to be in power the whole time. You may not have such sort of a hyper-nationalist in power. And Ukraine may be able to renegotiate or get that territory back, maybe by having a referendum down the road and having some, you know, proper electoral processes that allow the Crimeans and then those 4 provinces, the folks there. So it doesn't necessarily have to be seen as a done deal. Yes, in the moment, it would be quite painful. Again, I was talking about Chinese nationalism.
Right.
Ukrainians are nationalists, right? This is going to be very painful, right, for the country. So yes, you know, Ukraine could be left in a rump state. But what I'd say is over the longer term, they may be able to get that territory back. It's happened before historically.
So it's interesting. I mean, political changes in governments, whether it's Russia, the United States, China, I mean, these things, as you say, kind of are going to impact things more longer term. Monica, thank you so much. Monica Toff, Professor of International Politics at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, joining us from Medford, Massachusetts. Folks, we've got a little bit of a rally underway. We're up about, well, we're flat on the S&P. We're up 2 points. I know. Tim's like, don't say.
Still
it's
a
not
great
rally.
day.
It is. This is Bloomberg.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got 20 minutes to go until we wrap up the trading month of May. Right now, we have got the S&P 500 index holding on to a gain. The Dow higher. NASDAQ is lower. So let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks are mixed in a choppy session, but well off the session lows. Dow is currently up 92 points. S&Ps are a little changed, and NASDAQ is still lower by 0.4%. The U.S. 10 yield is at 4.41. Gold and oil are in the red, and Bitcoin, that's down by 1.2%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were consumer staples and utilities. Energy was under pressure, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Walmart and Amgen, while NVIDIA fell 3% and led to the downside. After earnings, Gap plunged as much as 21%. And regarding the tariffs, the U.S. plans wider China sanctions in the tech space with a subsidiary crackdown. Wrapping things up, Palantir rose to an all-time intraday high. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. Have a great weekend. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. This is not a toy. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. It's
the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
The funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, TikTok, everybody. Just about 18 minutes coming up on the close on this Friday, wrapping up the day and the trading week overall. Just heard from Bill and Charlie. We're definitely, I said a rally, but I meant earlier, like rally off our lows, but we're still just down about 2 points on the S&P 500 and just down about 43 on the NASDAQ 100, but much more positive than we were earlier in the session.
That's right, and it looks like the S&P 500 still on course for its best May since 1990, Carol, so we'll see if that could hold through 4 p.m.
35 years, that's a long time. All right, let's get to it. Tyler Rosenlicht is with us, portfolio manager, head of natural resource equities at the publicly held investment firm Cohen & Steers. He is here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Keep in mind, the firm has about $87 billion in assets under management. Tyler, you reminded me, it's been a while. Good to have you back. Just let's start broadly, big picture, your investment thesis and focus. Talk to us a little bit about it, especially against the backdrop of, every day we're following news out of Washington and what kind of impact that has on policy and ultimately industries and corporate earnings.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I guess there's kind of two pieces that I can talk about. One is the infrastructure side and one is natural resource equities. And I think both of them are really well positioned today. I'd start with infrastructure. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and every day we wake up to new news that's causing a lot of concern.
Right.
What we like about infrastructure is it's really predictable. We think about it as a lower volatility, downside protected asset class. It's the stuff that you have to pay for as a consumer. It's what helps make the economy run. So we've seen a lot of interest in infrastructure, and it's very sensible to us.
You have a lot of energy companies in that fund specifically.
So within infrastructure, it's just utilities and then pipeline companies. For us, it's really the predictable.
So it is truly the infrastructure.
Just the infrastructure. Now we have natural resource equities as well, which invests across the energy value chain, metals and mining, and agribusiness. That's also seeing a lot of interesting things today, just given all the volatility that we have.
So how do you read, with everything going on with the economic data, to the back and forth with the trade headlines, how do you use those types of stories to then try to figure out what the best investment thesis is?
Yeah, so let's start with infrastructure. So one of the unique things about it as an asset class is the risk that really keeps us up at night is regulatory risk and changes to regulation, changes to policy. That can be on the national level. Are we going to potentially privatize Amtrak? Could that mean for us as investors? Or on the more local level, so is the utility commission going to change the rules of the game or the returns for a local utility? So our focus,
allow more nuclear, or
allow more nuclear, which we're really excited and bullish on.
Which we've seen the president sign some executive orders to ramp that up in the U.S.
Yeah, to us, it's really a good thing. We think we're in an energy deficit globally. We think there's this tension between trying to find decarbonization efforts, but also have predictable baseload energy. Nuclear to us is a great example. It's going to require a lot of government support. And so making sure that we can understand what's going on from a policy perspective is what's going to drive investment opportunities for us.
I am curious in this fund. I'm just looking at year to date. I think it is up. I'm just looking at here. Is it up about Why am I not seeing this number?
Probably kind of like mid-single digits, call it 7 or 8%. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just think about in terms of the market volatility that we've been seeing, have you been adding? Have you been subtracting? Like, I'm just curious how, like, moving in and out. How much?
So I'd start with the investor appetite. We've definitely seen a lot of investor interest in infrastructure in particular. Again, uncertainty is really high, and folks are looking for ways to get equity-like returns, but with a little bit less volatility, and that's what infrastructure does. Clearly, sort of, there's a lot of news out there on we need more infrastructure development. How do we finance that? And listed companies in particular are benefiting. For us, I'd say we've been somewhat defensively positioned.
Okay,
we think sort of there's concerns around the macroeconomy. Things like freight rail volumes and so forth are a little bit less predictable. So we've definitely moved to, I'd call it like a 4.5 or 5 on a 0 to 10 scale in terms of risk on, risk off, which is just kind of balanced. There's some concerns out there, but we're not super concerned, and we just are trying to find the right stocks and sectors today.
What do you think are the hottest picks within infrastructure, if you're looking kind of more within groups or maybe more specific companies that are listed?
Yeah, nuclear to us is really interesting. You know, we invest in the...
Everybody's kind of in on nuclear.
The utilities...
Is it just because of the data? You know, I'm thinking about all of the AI and the data and the energy needs, or was that more... It seemed to kind of supercharge it, if you will, but I'm just curious if it was kind of percolating anyway.
I think that's part of it, but it goes a little bit beyond that, which is, you know, we think the world needs more energy, and we want energy that is, you know, good for the environment. But we also
minus the nuclear waste.
Well, for sure.
We still have to figure that one out.
But we also want it that's predictable and what we call base load. You know, the problem with a lot of renewables is that they're intermittent. And when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, they don't produce power. Guess what? If you're a data center CEO, that's a big problem. You need to make sure that the power can stay on. So nuclear to us is like the one resource that serves both masters. It is decarbonized. Yes, there is the spent uranium we have to deal with, but it's also baseload. It runs at very high capacity factors at very low variable costs. And I think people are saying, hey, we know we need the energy. This is the sort of best of the worst, if you want to think about it that way, and that's why it's coming back in vogue.
What about commodity investors? Because I know you're looking at kind of the performance of real assets now versus how they would have been the last decade.
Yeah, we're really excited about the commodity cycle, and we're really excited about the natural resource equity cycle as well. I mean, we've thought about it as we've exited this period of abundance, which was kind of the 2007 to 2020 period, and we've entered what we call the era of scarcity. Generally, demand for commodities and materials is pretty strong. We've underinvested in the supply side for a really long time. Commodity producers, you know, if you can find the right ones that aren't going to sort of miss in terms of their production profiles, they're really cheap. And we think marginal costs for what they produce are going to rise, and that's going to be good for them. So,
who benefits more, Canadian investors or U.S., if you're looking at the commodities aspect?
It really depends on the commodity you're talking about and sort of the investment. Like, for instance, take oil. We're actually pretty bearish oil, but we particularly don't like U.S. shale producers because of the depletion. Right, they see massive declines in volumes every year. We like the Canadian oil sands producers because they produce with a lot less sort of base declines. So generally speaking, the Canadian economy is a lot more commodity centric, but I think you can find good opportunities in both places.
Let's talk about a couple companies you do like in particular, and one of them is TRP, TC Energy Corporation. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, just very broadly speaking, it's an energy, natural gas pipeline company, very predictable. You know, their EBITDA, when they say what it's going to be at the beginning of the year, tends to be what it is at the end of the year.
Right.
We think demand for natural gas is going to keep growing. We think data centers and everything else are going to require more investment in gas pipelines. They've got a really good footprint, and they do own some nuclear assets in Ontario that we think will sort of see some life extensions that could be good for them. But it's a very predictable way to play energy infrastructure across North America.
Canadian company, looks like it's up about almost 9% so far year to date.
Correct.
One last one, got about 30 seconds. Waste Connections, ticker is WCN. This is an American company or U.S. company.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't necessarily think about environmental services as infrastructure. We think they are. For us, it's about pricing power. It's what businesses...
You got to deal with it. It is part of the infrastructure.
You have to pay the bill, and guess what? They can raise their rates with inflation or better than inflation. So for us, we're always on the hunt for what businesses have pricing power. We've found that in a lot of waste management businesses over time, and that tends to be one that we feel really good from a volume perspective as well.
Yeah, and that name is up almost about 15% year to date.
Wow.
Yeah, I think about this stuff a lot. No, waste is like, unfortunately, it's part of our world, right? You got to figure it out. Really good stuff. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah. All right. Look forward to next time. Tyler Rosenlicht, he's portfolio manager, head of natural resource equities over at Cohen & Steers, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Folks, we're coming up on 10 minutes until we wrap up this trading day. Just up a hair on the S&P 500. And you've got a NASDAQ 100 that's down about 29. Carol Master, Just Benton, and this is Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, yes, indeed, everybody. We are just about 7 minutes away from the closing bell. It's been kind of a wild day. Carol Massar, Jess Metten. Jess is in for Tim. Tim's out on this Friday. But I mean,
keeping us on our toes for sure.
Right? Right?
It's interesting because you look at the S&P 500, just pretty flat for the day, but so much else has been going on. I feel like I've been running around all day.
Yeah, it's not like it's just a flat chart, right?
No,
like we were down
it's not
a
showing
lot
the
more.
whole story of today and how busy we've been.
Yeah, welcome to kind of 2025, everybody. Just a reminder. I mean, we had some stress in terms of concerns about U.S.-China, trade tensions again. We had the president tweeting such earlier in today's session, and then we've seen from various events out of the White House that the president might be, we're talking with President Xi that there might be something that happens. So it feels like people are cooling a little bit, but we shall see, we shall see. I just want to get to a story that is the most read on the Bloomberg in the past 60 minutes. Has to do with Jamie Dimon. We all know him well. I feel like he is the voice that largely speaks for Wall Street. He is, I think, the last remaining CEO from the great financial crisis.
That's right.
So when Jamie speaks, we kind of all sit up a little bit straighter. He has warned that a crack in the bond market is going to happen due to the U.S. government and Federal Reserve massively overdoing spending and quantitative easing.
And this is really important just given the fact that when you're looking at U.S. Treasuries, they are on track for their first monthly loss this year. As President Trump's abrupt policy shifts have shaken, obviously, investor confidence, even though we have seen that rebound most recently in the equity market here. So the worry is that, of course, we've talked so much about the budget deficit picked up in May, and that's really tied to a tax cut bill moving through Congress right now, Carol.
Yeah, listen, and to be fair, the longtime boss of the biggest bank in the United States echoed comments he made last month when he said he expects a kerfuffle in the Treasury market that prompts a Fed intervention. At that time, he cited U.S. bank supplementary leverage ratio. It's something we've talked about with our David Weston here, and other regulations with deep flaws that, if fixed, would allow banks to more actively intermediate. But he's making these comments again at the Reagan National Economic Forum that is underway, because I just don't know if it's going to be a crisis in 6 months or 6 years, and I'm hoping that we change both the trajectory of the debt and the ability of market makers to make markets. Unfortunately, it may be that we need that to wake us up. It's interesting because, once again, we are all focused on rising U.S. debt, the trajectory of that debt, and here we are facing down another, spending bill and tax bill that's just going to go and add more to the debt picture.
It feels like that conversation continues to be ongoing, but even just looking more generally and broadly at banks and how they've performed so far this month, the KBW Bank Index, so BKX is the ticker symbol on that. It's actually up over 8% month to date.
Wow.
So that's on pace for its best month since January. So actually, that looks like, obviously since Trump was inaugurated on January 20th. So looking at that, banks picking up steam after losing some of their luster earlier this year.
I mean, listen, banks have been doing well, right? I think there's been some concerns about whether the rate environment, the economic environment. We haven't seen necessarily M&A coming back as strongly, although we have seen some big deals this year, Jess, but trading volatility can be really beneficial to those firms.
Those
right?
trading desks specifically, when you're looking at that. So obviously a number of them benefited, as we heard from their most recent earnings reports, but then we'll have another update. Even though it seems like we're past earnings season, still have obviously a lot of consumer packaged good companies that report this week, as well as retailers. But then second quarter earnings season, I mean, that doesn't start until mid-July. So it seems like a far away, but actually not too far away once we get past this next month in June.
Listen, we finish up one and we start another one. And it'll be interesting, too, in the next earnings season, because I think we'll get some resolution, in terms of tariffs and what it really means for companies. And so we'll see what that is, and then we'll get a better idea of the specific impact, right? As everybody kind of continues to hedge or give you a couple of different scenarios about the way forward. Quick check on the markets, folks, as we are just a few minutes away from the closing bell, just up about 8 points on the S&P 500, Dow Jones Industrial Average, a gain of 102 points, and the NASDAQ 100, a gain of about 14 points. We are we're seeing some buying, or we have seen some buying into the close and near our best levels of the session. Do not go anywhere. Jess and I heading over to our TV colleagues. We're going to count you down to the close on this Friday. The closing bell starts right now.
Closing Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu, taking you through to the closing bell. Joining us right now for our global simulcast is none other than Jess Menton. Alex Steele has the day off. Oh, and there is Carol Nasser as well, as we welcome our audiences across our Bloomberg platforms.
Are you feeling
television,
outnumbered,
radio,
Romaine?
our partnership with YouTube, Jess Menton, here on a momentous end of the month here, last trading day in the month of May.
I mean, I'm going to let Jess put it into perspective, but I'm just going to say for the month, I'm just looking at
not
those.
now, though, right? You're going
In a second.
okay.
I'm going to set her up. I'm going to tee her up. The major industry groups in the S&P 500, 10 of the 11 are higher. Infotech up about 11% for the month overall, Jess.
All right, and just looking at the size and scope here, S&P not only on pace for its best month since November 2023, but if you look at it, up over 6% this month. So basically, it's about to notch its best gain for May specifically since 1990, holding on to this right at 4 p.m., guys.
Do you know what I said? I asked if she was born back then. I was like...
I definitely was alive in 1990.
You're so seasoned, you know the
I have a
markets,
youthful
but I
glow.
was just curious.
So this raises the question of what happens next. I feel like we've run out of some immediate catalysts. We're waiting for progress on the big, beautiful bill. We are waiting for the Fed, of course, but they're not going to do anything. We're waiting for the jobs report, but it's all going to be fairly incremental. What's the next catalyst?
Well, you have, of course, obviously that big Fed meeting. Don't forget all of these dates when it comes to Trump's tariffs, which I've been trying to catalog all of them, and it's kind of dizzying. And don't forget also, guess what? Congress, or at least the Senate, coming back from vacation and now going to deal with that big, beautiful something.
That'll take a while.
We'll see if they can deal with that, but the market for right now, taking it in stride. Fractional gains and losses across the board on the day, but that really belies what was a relatively strong week and an even stronger month of May. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to finish out the day only fractionally higher by, we'll just call it about 0.1%, but it's still sitting on a sizable gain of about 4% for the month of May. The S&P 500 unchanged on the day, but adding about 1% on the week and more than 6% in May. The NASDAQ Composite down 3%, 0.3% on the day, but 10% for the month. The NASDAQ 100 up 0.9%. And as far as your small and mid caps go, we should point out the Russell 2000 fractionally lower on the day, but it did add about 5% in the month of May. The S&P Equal Weighted Index adding about 4% in the month of May, and the mid caps, Carol, adding about 5% in the month of May.
Yeah, pretty significant. All right, folks. And if you look at the S&P 500 in today's session, kind of an even split, some bouncing around in terms of the overall index. But Scarlett, you've got 259 names to the upside, 243 to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the IMAP and show you how it breaks down in terms of the 11 sectors in the S&P 500. And two groups finishing up by better than 1%. Consumer staples and utilities, those are your classic defensive sectors. It's where investors go to when they seek shelter and seek some stability. Communication services ending with a 0.5% advance. As for the sectors in the red, energy lower by 0.75%. Consumer discretionary and tech also in the red.
All right, a lot of red and green there. Let's get to some individual gainers. Ulta on that list, up more than 16% at its highs today, finishing the day with about a 12% gain. Intraday it was up, I think, the most since 2020. Number one gainer in the S&P 500. The company coming out, boosting its full-year profit outlook. And it also talked about comp sales were also higher than expected, and talking about the last quarter. And analysts kind of flagging some of the strong execution at the company.
I'm absolutely fascinated by this. I mean, because remember yesterday you had e.l.f. rally like 20-something%, also in the beauty space here.
Yes.
Is this the play?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think when people are feeling a little crunched, they call this what? Kind of a small little spending you can do to kind of get some pleasure. So
something to make you feel good.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily cost a whole lot to do here.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, but some of this stuff's expensive, so I don't know what a little luxury it is. Costco. Let's also stay in the retail space. This is the number 4 gainer in the NASDAQ 100, folks, up about 3%. Company posted third quarter earnings per share that beat the average analyst estimate. Company talking about navigating some of the tariffs out there and the economic turbulence by flexing its scale and devoted. Following it, it is looking at some potential price changes on its item-by-item basis. So,
Scarlett. Yeah. It was so funny. I was looking at their earnings report, and you look at the growth rate. Did you know that like 6 percentage points of that growth rate was from the Scarlet Fu household?
I believe it.
Yeah.
I buy in bulk for everything.
She does.
Also, Lisa Mateo on the surveillance. She's there, I think, regularly. E-commerce sales also were growing about 16%. Hey, one more, Palantir Technologies. This is the #2 gainer in both the S&P and the NASDAQ 100, guys. It's up almost 8% in today's session. This after the New York Times reported that the Trump administration has expanded the data analysis software companies' work across the federal government in recent months. By the way, Palantir has received more than $113 million in federal government spending since the president took office. This again, the New York Times reporting, citing some public records. All right, Jess, over to you.
Moving over and looking at those decliners, as Carol is talking about too. So I'm going to start off with Gap, ticker symbol GAP, because it dropped actually 20%.
Aren't you glad they finally changed their ticker, Jess?
It's actually much easier now, so I appreciate that. And also down, so 20% loss. I mean, this has erased its gains for the year, and also its worst day actually since early April. So that, maybe not surprisingly, unfortunately came as that tariff hit warning that it gave it weakness at its smaller brands, when it's talking about some of those other ones too. Banana Republic is one of them too, but they talked about how it could have an impact as much as $300 million from that tariff impact, and revealed some of that stubborn weakness there. Moving over and looking also at the biggest decliner though in the S&P 500, Regeneron, REGN is the ticker symbol, down 19%, its worst day since April 2011 there. So this actually came after a drug trial missed the mark here, and 2 least trial drugs here, experimental, specifically when it's going on and not meeting those goals as far as what's happening there. And Sanofi also had as far as when it's looking at its smokers lung drug trial data, unfortunately coming in not as good as expected. And then wanted to end on contact lens maker Cooper Companies, ticker symbol COO. That actually was the second worst performer in the S&P 500, down almost 15%, worst day since November 2008. That actually came after it cut its outlook for organic growth for the year. And the company, even though it reported better than expected earnings results for the second quarter, but did see a guidance downgrade, and also specifically by JP Morgan, guys. So that's pressuring the shares.
Hey, pop quiz for you, Jess. So Regeneron, second biggest decliner in the S&P 500 in the month of May. What was the #1 decliner?
In the S&P 500 for this month, let's see. I don't know. It surprised me.
United Health.
Oh, United Health, of course.
Yeah, of course.
You can use the MOV function and look at it on a monthly basis.
I'll always be selling, Jess. Yields. No, that's me. Sorry. I'm always looking for Alex Steele, who's, of course, has a well-deserved day off here. You take a look at the yield picture here. Slight moves lower here on the day, but we talk a lot here about the first big decline that we've seen on a price basis, on a monthly basis, I should say, for the U.S. Treasury market. Of course, we had 3 straight months where we did see a rally, and, of course, that being pushed back a little bit. And, of course, we talk about that inverse correlation. Gene Tenuzo, our guest on TV just a little while, that inverse correlation returning between stocks and bonds, a healthy sign, according to him.
All right, don't know if there's going to be a song written about this, but big day for Taylor Swift. She has actually bought back her early albums. She has been on a crusade for many, many years, a fight with her former record label, also with music manager Scooter Braun, about the selling many years ago of her songs. And she owns the music. She wrote it, but her songs, the original recordings, were sold, and she's been trying to kind of get them back. She's also been re-recording them.
Now, this is a big deal, especially for anyone who's been paying attention to those Taylor versions in recent years here. So big news coming out of this for her.
Yeah, so my question is, are we still going to have Taylor versions on Spotify and any other streamers?
That's a great question.
What should we listen to?
Yeah, I don't know. Are they materially different? You know, somebody who doesn't listen to a lot of Taylor Swift, but I am intrigued by the business of this, right? I mean, we talked a lot when she was doing those re-recordings as to why she even would have to do that. And we all know, of course, with a lot of these record contracts, particularly when these are young artists coming in, they kind of sign their life away and not quite noting it. And we won't get into some of the shenanigans that Scooter Braun has alleged to have pulled in that as well. But the idea that she had the clout and obviously the money to be able to sort of reclaim all of this stuff for herself, I mean, it is a victory not just for her, but you wonder if it might set a precedent for other artists out there as well.
Yeah, something Reba McEntire actually had done in the past, and Kelly Clarkson had brought it up, and I think that's what spurred Taylor Swift to doing it.
It's her property. I mean, it's her creative property, right?
I want to know what she spent. I want to know what she spent.
Yeah, I do too.
She didn't share how much she paid to, get all the ownership back, but she did say that she now controls all of her life's work. So we're talking about photography, album art, videos, and unreleased songs, in addition to the master recordings.
And she's working on a new music as well too. So, which I assume she also
2026,
I assume she also
2027.
owns.
Wait.
And I think that it's safe to say that there's some cachet from the original recordings, right? She can re-record them and re-release them, but there's something about, you know, as she was growing in her career, right, to have ownership of that. I think there's a lot of value.
Jess, what's your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm going to say album instead. I feel like I do really like the Reputation album in general. I know it was a little bit different than some of her other albums, but then also 1989 I feel like is always a popular one too.
What about you, Scarlett?
I like Love Story. That's my favorite song.
What about you, Romaine?
That one where she cursed a lot on the Midnights thing, that was pretty cool.
I was taking you for a folklore kind of guy, but I guess I was...
Right, yeah.
I like Taylor. You know, I like listening to her.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Maybe we'll listen to some Taylor into the weekend. That is a wrap. Our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. Scarlett and Romaine continuing on TV, and Jess and I right here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. We'll see.
This is Bloomberg
Our coverage
Business
continues,
Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, everybody, we continue on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Carol Masser along with Jess Metton. Tim is off on this Friday. Now, every day, as you know, more on President Trump's tariffs push, including today with the administration ramping it up on China again, and then the president saying from the Oval Office that he does hope to work something out with President Xi. We've had attacks on U.S. higher education, most notably Harvard this week, retail earnings, a partnership between United and JetBlue, some economic data, Elon kind of out of the White House. Just a few things on our mind today and really for the week overall. There's more. Putting it all into perspective while focusing on those longer-term trends and stories that really will impact the greater world longer term, the investors, too, that need to be aware of all of it, is the team over at Bloomberg Wall Street Week, headed by host David Weston. He joins us now here in studio, the show ready to hit air at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on radio and TV. David, another week, a lot going on. I want to start with some airline news because we did have, you know, United and JetBlue, this kind of far-reaching partnership and getting access to some of their gates at different airports. It made us think about kind of what's been going on at Newark in a big way.
Exactly. United at Newark actually has had a lot of troubles because of the air traffic control problems. We've had some real incidents that are pretty darn scary, including with the communications going down. So one of the things we wanted to look at was air traffic control because the Secretary of Transportation now says he's going to fix it. And we want to know what was involved in fixing it. And by the way, why hasn't it already been fixed?
Yeah.
Why does it take this to get it going?
Right.
And it turns out there's a lot of different reasons. We talked to Elaine Chao, who's the former Secretary of Transportation, who has a view about structural changes that need to happen that she tried to start when she was Donald Trump's first Secretary of Transportation. But we also thought we'd just talk to a regular old air traffic controller, somebody who'd done it for a lot of years and was an officer in one of the air traffic control. He now teaches, actually, done at the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. You know that one in Daytona Beach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is Michael McCormick and what he had to say to try to lay out how big a project it is to fix air traffic control.
I'm curious to hear
like
just how much...
changing the tire on a bus while the bus is rolling down the road. You can't shut down the air traffic control system to upgrade it or to fix it. You need to be able to keep the system up and running while you deploy new technology and you upgrade old equipment. Fixing the FAA's air traffic control system requires a very structured, very formalized approach to what is going to be done, when is it going to be done, how is it going to be integrated into the current system, and then how is it going to be waterfalled or to the rest of the air traffic control facilities across the country. So it's not going to be an overnight, and it's not going to be simple.
So he, for me, is like central casting of an air traffic controller.
Totally.
I mean, totally measurable.
That's very
But let me tell you something he did not tell me, and I found out afterwards by really searching for him. He was in charge of the New York region on 9/11, and he's one of the first people who got word from the flight coming down from Boston that something was wrong.
Wow.
He called the tower at Newark and said, watch out for this airplane. It's coming down the Hudson. It might try to land in the Hudson. And the air traffic controller said, it just hit the North Tower. He was the guy in charge.
Oh,
to
my
give you a
God.
sense of what these people have to put up with in terms of stress. But he really laid out, it's an elaborate process. They've been trying to update. It takes time, but we shouldn't expect it to happen overnight.
I can't even imagine just how emotionally impactful to have a job like that. And I was curious too, just in general, if people are stopping flying. I mean, I flew last week to go on an international trip to Portugal, but I decided to fly out of JFK instead of Newark. So I'm wondering, in your interviewing, what perspective are you hearing?
It's interesting. I mean, one of the things I must say, everybody emphasized, Mike McCormick did, Elaine Chao did, other people we talked to, was it is safe. And in fact, if there's a question of being safe, what they'll do is cut back on the flights. Because part of the problem is there's been such a dramatic increase in flights, and that's what they've done at Newark. I mean, the problem with Newark, I think, at this point is not so much, I don't know, but I think safety. It's just there may be more delays because there are fewer flights because they've cut it down.
I've driven past and I've seen the planes kind of lined up, like waiting to take off in terms of the delays. I go back to what you started with. It's like, why is this all of a sudden coming to fruition? We've seen the pictures of the crowded airspace, especially in like the New York metro area.
We interviewed a woman from GAO, Government Accounting Office, who did a report to Congress on this about 2 or 3 years ago, saying it is not sustainable. And I must say, everyone said the air traffic controllers are wonderful. There are not nearly enough of them.
Right.
But they're wonderful and they're real professional. But the problem actually a lot has to do with funding. Because what happens because of Congress, it's in fits and starts. And to do one of this, you can't do it in a year. You can't do it in 2 years. You need a steady stream of funding. And you can see what's going on right now with the budget and the debt level and things like that. So they'll start down the road and they have to pull it back. And so some people think, and this is Elaine Chao's solution, it's not the current Secretary Duffy's solution, but she thinks that we should follow Canada and take it out of the FAA, make it an independent nonprofit company, partly funded by the airlines, because in Canada, she says it's worked a lot better. Now, other people say Canada's a lot smaller country in terms of air traffic, but there are real concerns with the funding because it's not consistent enough.
It's so interesting. There was a story, I think, about President Xi, talking about doing some more infrastructure spending. And I'm not saying that that's the model to follow, but there is something to be said that there are some long projects, right, across the nation that need to be dealt with. And they're going to require long-term investments and commitments.
Yeah, and you have to know that the money's going to be there. There's going to keep coming. It's going to take years to get done. I mean, he does say, Mike McCormick does say, the FAA is heading in the right direction. The plan is a good plan, but they just need some consistency and some funding.
We really are safe?
Yeah, they swear they are. I mean, I'm not qualified to know.
I've backed off of United just because maybe more concerns about delays, but it makes you wonder.
Well, as I say, the first thing they say is it is really the safest air traffic control system in the world. But that doesn't mean there aren't problems, because obviously we've seen problems. They have problems.
Speaking of infrastructure, you've got another story about undersea cables.
Yeah, this is an obscure one, right? First of all, do you know where the first undersea cable was? It was from Ireland to the United States in the 1850s, and the first thing it was used for was a telegram from Queen Victoria to James Buchanan for the president. But anyway, over time, these obviously have gotten exploded, and we've gone to fiber optics. And now, I mean, essentially 99% of all internet traffic goes over undersea cables. They're massive, and so you wonder who invests in these, how does it make sense? It's all hyperscalers.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it is. It's Google. Google is the first one to
did it.
I guess
they have to, right?
Yeah, and they say, we don't trust anybody else to do it. We'll lay it down. We'll do it. But we talked to KKR and said, well, how do you invest if the hyperscalers are doing it? He said, it's the services. KKR is investing in the service companies, like the ships that have to service these things.
Oh, yeah.
Take care of them.
Right.
That's where the investment opportunity is, according to KKR.
Because you have to do it, right? They can't go down.
Exactly. And also, if you're a hyperscaler, you don't particularly want to be in the job of maintaining undersea cables.
Right.
But you have to have it available 24/7 when you need it. So let somebody else pay for that. And so you just basically buy up the capacity for serving.
I love all this stuff. That's
pretty obscure, huh?
Yeah,
But
totally.
It's kind of fun.
But you need it, like especially in this environment.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I'm curious about, lastly, when it comes to funding cuts and how they affect innovation, what you're seeing there.
Well, Scholar Food did this story for us, actually, and we talked to the head of Princeton, we talked to the head of Cornell Tech. You remember that? That's over here.
That's right here.
Exactly right. It's right here. Something that our boss, Mike Bloomberg, was behind, when he was mayor, as well as the Johns Hopkins. 3 institutions he's had something to do with over the years. But we talked to him about what this really means to cut this money. And obviously, the problem is it's research money and an awful lot of innovation, certainly in medicine, in healthcare, but going well beyond that, comes from these academic centers and the talented scientists who are attracted.
Right.
And to cut that off, we really could damage U.S. competitiveness and innovation if this continues, or we have this kind of disruption.
We had a life science venture capitalist in from Genoa Ventures earlier this week, and that was one of the things, or last week, one of the things she's concerned about is that the lack of R&D, that these things lead to companies. I mean, it's just all along.
Well, and that as you know, there's a long lead time on a lot of that things. That's, again, that's not 3, 4, 5 years. We are talking actually for a story coming up next week. It's 15, 20 years off, sometimes on the payoff of that. So you got to have an access to capital. And the United States has had such an advantage in that, but it's been a combination of government funding plus academics plus venture capital.
Long-term investments. There's a theme there.
There is a theme. That's right. Exactly.
Great stuff as always. David, thank you so much. Bloomberg Wall Street Weeks. David Weston coming up at 6 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and TV. Coming up, we're getting into the growing dominance of YouTube. That's coming up next on Bloomberg Business Weekday.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. It is on to the trading month of June. Where has this year gone? This Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention, growing businesses. Oracle's offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment, see if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. S&P 500 index ends the day little Little change, but lower by half a point. A volatile session with the S&P finishing down by half a point, ending the month of May at 59.11. Dow up 54. That was a gain of just about 0.1% today. NASDAQ fell 0.3%, down by about 23, down by 62 points on NASDAQ. The NASDAQ 100 index down today by 0.1%. Bottom line here, S&P 500 index had its best May since 1990. 10-year 4.39%, the 2-year 3.89%. Gold down 0.8%, lower by $26 the ounce, 32.91. And West Texas Intermediate crude 60.90 a barrel, down today by just about 0.1%. Earnings news. Today we did see shares of Ulta Beauty surging by 11.8%. Also after earnings today, Gap plunged 20.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Carol Massar, along with Jess Metton, of course, of our U.S. equities team, and she's in for Tim on this Friday. Hey, we want to get to a story. Do you watch YouTube a lot?
I actually do. I feel like it's so easy to just continue to go down rabbit holes of all the things that you watch one thing, another video will come up, and it just... I probably spend too much time.
We do that too, but we have dedicated channels that we definitely go to. We sail and we watch some of the sailors that are going around the globe. So we'll tune in every week or 2 weeks when they've got a new episode. Got to keep in mind, YouTube has spent the past few years trying to make itself the centerpiece of the living room. For 2 decades, it has tried to convince advertisers that it's the future of entertainment. It has had some problems making that case. So writes our own Lucas Shaw. We want to head to our LA bureau for Bloomberg News and to Bloomberg News managing editor, media and entertainment head, Lucas Shaw. He's really the ringleader, I should say, behind our Bloomberg Screen Time coverage and vertical as well. Hey, Lucas, good to check in with you. Great story. YouTube, it feels like it's, I don't know, I feel like everybody's talking about it. It's coming into its own. What's going on? And is kind of everybody talking about it with good reason?
Well, I'd say everyone in Hollywood is paying more attention to it than they used to be. You know, it's funny to talk about YouTube as anything new, right? It's been around for 20 years as of this year. It's been widely popular for at least a decade, if not longer. You know, it's the most popular music service in most of the world. It's become a very popular platform for podcasting. You know, it's where people essentially watch late night. It's the new home of all. I use it for yoga, but I think that what's really happened over the last couple of years is twofold. One is it's just as traditional entertainment has gotten more challenging and as the TV business has shrunk, advertisers have looked to YouTube as the future and started to spend more and more money there. Creators who have been there for a long time have started to build businesses and been able to raise real capital. And then I think data also does play a real role here, where Nielsen puts out these monthly reports on how much time people are spending watching a given streaming service on television. And YouTube has gone from being already number 2 behind Netflix to now being the unequivocal number 1. People spend more time watching YouTube on a television than everything Disney owns. That's streaming, that's TV networks. And I think that has really reinforced for people in entertainment, like, holy crap, YouTube is really big and we need to look at this again.
What do we know as far as behind Alphabet's efforts when it comes to streaming? When you think about other rivals, say like Amazon with Amazon Prime and the streaming services that they have, and you're mentioning obviously Netflix too here.
Well, look, YouTube is leaps and bounds bigger than what any of the other tech companies have, right? Apple and Amazon have their own streaming services. Apple's is very niche. Amazon's is pretty big, but still much smaller. Both of them view themselves, I think, primarily as homes and retailers for other people's wares, right? Like Amazon is at its core a retailer. It wants to sell everyone else's streaming service. Apple wanted to make its TV app the place where you could come and find everything. The challenge that a lot of them ran into is a company like Netflix is like, I don't want to collaborate with you on this. I'm trying to become the place that everybody goes. You know, YouTube has aspects of it being this destination, right? They sell the live TV service, YouTube TV. You can pay for paid streaming services and stream them within YouTube. There are a lot of other things you can do besides watch core YouTube, but it has the biggest advantage of all, which is it has just YouTube. And so many people already come for that it becomes a natural hub to direct them to all these other things.
So I got to ask you, Lucas, our Sebastian Escobar is just saying YouTube Premium, like kind of changed his life, changed his mind. He said it's like $19 a month, a bit pricey, but no ads. I mean, is that where they're making their money, or do they need to be providing content that advertisers want to advertise with?
Well, look, YouTube still makes the majority of its money from advertising. I think last year it was, I'm going to say it's about 35 billion, but don't hold me to that. Maybe it was a little lower. Maybe it was closer to 30. Subscription-wise, the outside estimates now say the YouTube business is probably 15 to 20 billion. That's also massive. It's not as big as advertising. That's a mix of YouTube TV, the YouTube Premium. I think YouTube Premium is great for certain people, and the music service has also is a big lure. YouTube has become one of the bigger paid music services on top of being free. But it's still, look, that's like the nice growth area and something they're putting a lot of effort into. But YouTube is a division of Alphabet. Alphabet makes most of its money from advertising. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, but they want to have a little bit of everything. There's the quality of programming that you see on YouTube, I think is getting better each year. And that's one of the things that I tried to get at, is there's always been this perception of YouTube as sort of a home for lower quality smut. And there's some of that still, there's a lot of that still there, right? It's sort of there's an inexhaustible amount of video that you can watch on YouTube. But the stuff at the top end is starting to rival what you could see on TV.
How are Hollywood executives trying to jump in on this?
Well, so there's a long and checkered history of Hollywood and YouTube, in that about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, there was sort of an initial rush of investment, and Hollywood companies invested in all these companies called multi-channel networks that were sort of loose confederations of channels where the company itself didn't really own anything. They did a lot of business like ad sales or distribution on behalf of the channels. Turns out those were not very good businesses, but Disney spent a bunch of money on one, DreamWorks Animation bought one, Warner Brothers bought one or two. Now, I think they're looking at that again, but trying to be smarter about how they go about it. So that can be either in kind of just licensing existing shows, right? So Netflix has CoComelon, they have Miss Rachel, they have The Sidemen, Amazon has a big show with Mr. Beast, and that's essentially paying these people to bring what's already popular over to them. Or they may invest in some of these companies or try to strike deals. And those haven't happened yet, but I think they probably will at some point. You'll see an effort to kind of buy someone who has brands or properties that might work.
Yeah, it's just kind of fascinating. I guess, does it, bottom line, Lucas, I mean, going forward, do they want to have, I'm assuming the majority of their content, produced well, or do they like this idea that there's like kind of anybody can create a YouTube channel and put some content up there?
And they, in that case, is YouTube?
Well, I'm thinking about, I guess YouTube creating, their own content. It sounds like they want to kind of up the quality of it. But I just feel like there's just so many other people who do it too. And some of it's really good, some of it's not.
I don't think YouTube wants to finance a lot of its own programming.
Oh, okay.
That could change, but they have dabbled in that over the years, and it hasn't gone very well. And I think they much prefer being this neutral distributor and being a platform where people can upload anything. And they might invest or put money behind certain areas where they want to push people. But they have, Alphabet, Google, YouTube, any part of that colossus has never shown a ton of interest in being a proper studio in the same way that Amazon and Apple are now. Now, that could change. Someone made a good point to me the other day, which is like, if you're them and you want to be ahead in AI, would you want to buy a big studio and use that copyright to train your video model? Maybe. But to date, funding entertainment or kind of directly funding production has not been something that YouTube has liked a lot.
All right. Well, it's such a great deep dive. And I just feel like we are increasingly, when we're talking about like where everybody's watching, we are talking so much about YouTube. Lucas, thank you as always. Really appreciate it. of course, Bloomberg News Managing Editor, Media and Entertainment, Lucas Shaw. Check out his story. It's in the weekend edition, too, of Bloomberg Business Week, and you can check it out and read a little bit more in terms of details. There's some great, I mean, I think Lucas touched on it, but according to Nielsen, an average of more than 7 million people in the U.S. are watching YouTube on a TV at any given time.
Incredible.
More than watching Netflix and Amazon Prime Video combined. Fastest growing audience being viewers 65 and over. I don't know, it's just kind of wild. We watch it a lot in our household. All right, folks, let's get back to the markets. We did wrap up the trading day, the trading week. Let's get a check on your top business stories and where we ended up. Here's Charlie Powell.
I thank you very much. Well, let's get right to the numbers. As we move on to the trading month of June, we had the S&P 500 index ending little change today, down 0.5 point. Was a volatile session. 59.11s where we wrap up the month, best month since 1990 on the S&P. The Dow today up 54. That was a gain of just about 0.1%. NASDAQ fell 62 points, lower today by 0.3%, with a 10-year currently yielding 4.39%. The 2-year 3.89%. Spot gold down $27 the ounce to $32.90, down 0.8%. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil 60.85 a barrel, down today by 0.1%. Bitcoin down 1.6%, 104,462 on Bitcoin. So today the S&P 500 index briefly erased losses to close little changed after President Trump said he expected to speak with Xi Jinping following a trade deal breach accusation. Palantir shares advanced today after the New York Times reported that the Trump administration has expanded the data analysis software company's work across the federal government in recent months. Palantir today up by 7%. By the way, this stock year to date is up 74%. Briefly on the economy, consumers hit the brakes in April after the strongest month of spending since early 2023, while inflation remained tame, consistent with the slowing economy. That data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Again, recapping here, the U.S. stocks end of the trading month of May. S&P little change today, 59.11, down by 0.5 point. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So we were just talking about YouTube with our own Lucas Shaw. Our next guest can be found on YouTube as well. Ayesha Curry, yes, you know the name. She's the wife of basketball icon Steph Curry. She is also, though, in a league all her own. She's a chef, author, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. She stands out for her work in food, lifestyle, also as well for her philanthropic efforts through her charity Eat, Learn, Play. She's also established herself in the media world as a founder of Sweet July Books. She joins us from California. Also with us is Holly Lee. She's author of The Big We, which was published through Sweet July Books. She is in Brooklyn. Welcome to both of you. Great to have you here with Jess and me. Ayesha, I want to start with you. Tell us about Sweet July Books and why you wanted to do it, because media, publishing, not the easiest environment right now.
No, of course, not at all. That's the elephant in the room. But I think it's such a great space for opportunity. And so Sweet July Books, you know, we were approached by Zando to have this beautiful imprint to be able to showcase incredible authors, big thinkers in a really cool, unique way, and really kind of cater to new audiences and what they might like to read. And so we've been so fortunate already to have some incredible authors. And now with Holly Lee having The Big We out into the universe, it just feels like it's a really full circle moment. And not only is she an incredible author and just an incredible mind, but she's an incredible human as well. And so we're very grateful to have her under the imprint.
Well, Holly, I want to bring you into the conversation because I know that you've been working on redefining philanthropy. Talk to us more about your book and more broadly about the platform as well.
Yeah. Hi, Carol. Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me on. Hi, Ayesha. I can't see you, but I'm waving to you from Brooklyn. Hi. And we got to see each other at the Time 100 philanthropy thing. Just, was it only last week in New York? That was so fun. So I wrote this book because the stories just were bursting and really needed to be told. I started the Asian Women Giving Circle 20 years ago, and I've been a big fan and cheerleader for collective giving and the power of people coming together around a shared set of values and vision for the world and pooling their money to do good in their neighborhoods and communities. And since I've been doing this for 20 years, I have so many great stories of regular Americans across this country who are doing really cool things with their friends, colleagues, book group mates, neighbors. So the stories, they just needed to be told. And then the context that we're in right now, which is that my sector of philanthropy and social change and nonprofits has been so dominated by very, very wealthy billionaires. And very respectfully, at the end of part 1 in my book, Carol and Jess, I ask Big Phil, which is my nickname for billionaire, heroic, individualistic philanthropy, to step aside, to make some space for the rest of us who have been practicing philanthropy and generosity in groups always.
No, I think that's a really good point. I do think there is this perception that it's only the big people or really, really wealthy people who can really move the needle when it comes to philanthropy. But we've learned, I mean, even not philanthropy, but political donations. We've seen candidates, attract a lot of small donors that end up in a lot of money. Aisha, I want you to come back in here. When you think about what you are hoping to build off of this platform and what you are looking to highlight, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think with the Big We, my hope is that we're encouraging people to start these giving circles within their own community, and that this leaves a template for people to realize, one, how easy it is, but how transformational it is at the same time. I remember growing up and, my parents did well for themselves. But what I noticed within the community was that everybody was taking care of each other. And I think that's just something that's become truly a lost art. And that we'd see so much ease within the infrastructure of our communities if we just, reconnect with that cup of sugar model. If you need a cup of sugar, come knock on my door. And so I think just that simple message that Holly has put together of how transformational this is, I think is what I hope people take away from the Big We.
Well, I think it's a really important point, and I also do wonder, Aisha, I just want to follow up in terms of things you want to highlight on your, with your publishing and with your media imprint, is in a time when there's a lot of division, economically, socially, racially, diversity-wise. It just seems like, we're at this interesting time, and I'm just curious how you use this platform, whether through supporting fictional or nonfiction works, to help maybe, create your own narrative or set a different message.
I think we definitely do both. And for me, in the early stages, it was about, well, what do I want to read? What am I interested in reading?
I hear it.
What I want to see, who's cool and fresh and has an incredible voice. And now it's like, okay, what's missing from the market, from the book offering? What space can we fill? What voice can we put on give a platform to that needs to be heard? And so really that's the angle we're attacking it from right now. And we've said from the beginning, there's 4 core pillars. It's food, faith, female empowerment, and family. And philanthropy obviously falls within that family pillar. And so for us, it's how are we tackling that? And really, it's like the I am woman, hear me roar of it all. And will we publish books from male authors in the future? I'm sure. But for me, it's really using my platform to push women forward and
All right, we're going to leave it there. Hey, guys, so good to get connection with you, and hopefully we can continue this conversation in the future. Aisha Curry, founder of Sweet July Books, and, of course, Holly Lee, author of The Big We. We do want to remind you, at the top of the hour, we are expected to hear from President Trump on the big tie-up between U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel. Our own Josh Wingrove is there. He's, of course, our Bloomberg News senior White House correspondent. Josh, where are we? You are in Mifflin, Pennsylvania. Tell us what's going on at this hour.
Waiting on the president. We got some of the pre-programming done. So, the main act is on his way here. took off about half an hour ago. Traveling with him, according to pool reports, is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Of course, the big question is what that CFIUS review situation, how is that going to be ironed out? Bessent, as the Treasury Secretary, heads that panel, and we just simply have not had word. The previous remarks here from U.S. Steel's CEO Dave Burritt and Takahiro Mori, the vice chairman of Nippon Steel, which has been sort of leading all this process, they both treated it as effectively a done deal, but stopped just short of, popping champagne. So we'll listen to what Trump has to say in it, but the indications are that they're still dotting I's and crossing T's. It just remains kind of up in the air. The stock closing a share under $54 or so today, so there's about 2% or so hanging on the vine under that $55 a share price.
What else are we expected to hear from the president this afternoon?
I'm listening for a few things. Number one, how quickly can this close? If he gives any indication of that, that's going to be news. Number two, if he firmly commits to, plowing forward and, in going ahead with it. In other words, gives a signal that the fine print that's still being worked out won't derail this thing. That'll be a big one. And if he details some of those investments, there's been mixed numbers on how much money Nippon Steel is pledging to invest on top of the actual acquisition price. So $14.1 billion to buy the company, but they're also talking reportedly about $14 billion in additional investment. But they haven't really detailed that. There's some sort of nervous questions about how firm that would be and where that money would go, which state, which plant, union, non-union. The politics get a little messy. So if they start talking about that, that'll also sort of perk up the ears of some of the people in attendance here, which include Congress members from some of those states who are hoping for investment to continue, things going forward. But remember, Trump opposed this deal. Joe Biden opposed this deal. It wasn't a particularly long list of people who opposed this deal, but it happened to include everyone running for president or in line to be president. So that's what's changed here. Trump has sort of, heeded some of the campaigns, some of the pressure from including Republican lawmakers here in Pennsylvania to go forward with this deal. And that investment is what helped sort of sell a lot of those folks on it. People who saw some of these U.S. steel plants, like the one we're in now, that need capital investment. And, if this deal had collapsed, there are big questions about where U.S. Steel would have gotten that from.
Yeah, really fascinating, Josh, and you're so right. We've kind of been all over the map with this possible link up. So I am curious too about the particulars. I know it's noisy there. Thank you so much for giving us the latest. And again, that is of course our Josh Wingrove, Bloomberg News senior White House correspondent there in Mifflin, Pennsylvania. That is ahead of President Trump's expected remarks on the partnership between Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. All right, yep. Of course, trading is over. We're about 44 minutes after the closing bell. Let's get, though, to what is top on the Bloomberg when it comes to markets and the business environment. Here is, once again, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much indeed. We are on to the trading month of June. Best May since 1990 on the S&P. A 6% gain for the S&P. Just talking about U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel. Of course, we'll have a whole lot more for you coming up in a moment. We've got U.S. Steel shares today up by 1.1%. ADRs of Nippon Steel today up by 0.8%. S&P little changed on the day, finishing May, heading into June and the weekend at 59.11. A drop today of 0.5 point, little change there. The Dow up 54, up 0.1%. Nasdaq Composite Index down 62, a drop there of just about 0.3%. Volatility gripping stocks today in the last stretch of the month. The 10-year 4.39%, the 2-year 3.89%. Gold down $25, down 0.8%, 32.92, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%, 60.77 for a barrel of WTI. Bitcoin lower by 1.3%, 104,743 on Bitcoin. So again, S&P did have a slide that reached 1.2% today, ended the day down 0.01%. Worth repeating, best May since 1990 on the month, up by 6%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week Daily. I'm Carol Massar along with Jess Metton on this Friday. Want to take a look at some of the stocks on the move for the week overall. Bloomberg News equities reporter Natalia Kenijevich is here in our studio. Let's start with one that really moved up big time this week.
Right. So I looked at the S&P 1500 stocks, and the best performing stock for this week is ELF Beauty, ticker ELF. It jumped by 35%. This is, of course, after cosmetic company agreed to acquire Hailey Bieber's beauty brand Rhode for $1 billion. However, we also saw a boost from potentially better than expected developments on the tariff front, but Bloomberg Intelligence analysts are saying that there could be some demand challenges for ELF as it plans to increase prices. I look at Bloomberg Terminal Function FA financial analysis to look where it gets the biggest sales from. Target is number one, Walmart, and about 12% of sales are coming from Ulta Beauty. Another big mover for this week is, of course, we see that demand is still resilient for cosmetics, but we don't know. Maybe people are just stockpiling ahead of tariffs.
What about when it comes to the retail front? Because we've had so many different stories with them this week so far.
You mean retail?
Well, specifically maybe for Gap.
Yes, exactly.
Versus other ones that were performing better today.
Yes, so minus 22% on a weekly basis. Of course, so for some analysts I spoke with, they say this is potentially an overreaction because overall the report wasn't that bad. Two biggest brands that account for about 80% of sales, Gap and Old Navy, sales are still up.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, yes, for Banana Republic, for Athleta, which account for about 20% of sales, they are like flat or slightly going down. And for analysts, maybe the number, when you put the dollar amount for the potential hit from tariffs, this sounds scary. But overall, CEO was on Bloomberg TV as well, and he said the goal for the company is to get an exposure of no more than 25% from any significant country. We know when it comes to exposure to China, as of now, it's about 10%, but by the end of this year, they plan it to be for about 3%.
Oh, that's a big change. That's a big move. Hey, let's talk about Texas Pacific Land Corp. What happened with that one over this week?
So I just looked at the S&P 500 sectors, and the worst performing sector for this week is energy, and this stock in particular is just the worst for this week. The ticker is TPL. This is an energy oil leasing land company. And overall, this is a macro story. This is related to oil concerns about supply. We know that OPEC Plus wants to increase potentially supply of oil. This is according to Bloomberg News reporting. Kazakhstan Deputy Energy Minister also hinted that they can potentially increase oil production. And then, of course, we have concerns about demand.
Not great for an E&P company if we're getting more from the Middle East or wherever, right?
Exactly.
Like what it means for their business.
Yeah, but on the flip side, guys, we know that it could be good for U.S. consumers as gasoline prices are moving down. People will have more disposable income and go to retailers and spend more.
We'll see that too, because discretionary, like we were talking about earlier, the worst performing sector so far this year, but there's a lot of different cohorts within discretionary, and retail is one of them. But they also straddle staples too, like Walmart and others in the dollar stores. So it's hard to get a good read when you're trying to gauge stocks with retail.
Natalia, thank you so much. For more conversations like this, check out our Stock Movers podcast, 5-minute episodes. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about time to wrap up on this Friday edition of Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Jess has been in for Tim Stenovec on this Friday in a day that really turned out to be a bit busy. Hearing from the president already, wrapping up Elon's tenure, it seems like, with Doge, at least officially, but it does sound like he's still going to be involved. At least that's what we heard from the president and Elon Musk. We're getting ready to hear from the president again in Pennsylvania to talk about the Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel deal. We've heard about a partnership. We've heard about a lot of things, but we want to understand the particulars of what this entity is going forward.
That's right. And we talked a lot about how even Trump had opposed this on the campaign trail. And not only him, so did Joe Biden, but specifically the United Steelworkers Union has opposed that sale, arguing that the Japanese company is making flashy promises that could potentially put those American jobs at risk. So when you're thinking about Trump's economic agenda and beyond that, this is really crucial. So it's going to be important to hear what they have to say and what specifics that we could hear out of this.
Just going to say our most read story on the Bloomberg at this hour has to do with President Trump expressing confidence a talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping could ease fresh trade tensions after White House officials vented some anger over Beijing's pace of issuing promised export licenses. We did hear the president talk to reporters just earlier in the Oval Office. He said, "I'm sure that I'll speak to President Xi and hopefully we will work something out." I will say, kind of watching the markets, and when we bounced off our lows, it kind of came around the same time that he said that. I don't know if it's exactly what caused it, but certainly easing U.S.-China trade tensions, getting some resolution, and hopefully a tariff situation between the new nations that isn't as onerous would certainly appease a lot of investors and maybe calm some of the nervousness that we've seen in the equity trade.
That's true, especially as the calendar flips to June. Typically, it's actually been the third weakest month of the century for the S&P 500 in June. But you still have a lot of different things. Obviously, there's a Fed decision June 18th. Not expected, obviously, if you're looking at swap markets, for there to be interest rate cuts. But this time around, we'll have the dot plots at this meeting because they're quarterly. We didn't get them at the May 7th decision, but that'll be important just to get a gauge of what they adjust for, whether or not it's economic growth, CPI, unemployment, but obviously the dot plots and where their median projections are for the rate paths for the end of this year and the coming years as well. And then, of course, 2 days after that, we'll have triple witching on June 20th, and then you'll still have end of month rebalancing.
You have to slow down because anybody's trying to take notes is like, I have no idea what she just said. I heard triple witching.
There's a lot of things going on the next month. So
no, it's a really good point.
But even summer doldrums, people talk about that, but there's still things happening in June, right?
I have to tell you, there has not been really a quiet summer in a really long time, and I almost want to say back to the great financial crisis. It used to really. There is always a point, I think, somewhere, maybe finally late August, but August you often see, I know because I tend to go away that time, there's often like some kind of sell-off that happens, like just stuff continues to come down. So we'll see, but as you said, we're going to get a jobs report next week.
That's right.
We've got a Fed meeting coming up very soon. We will see whether or not, then we'll be in this little lull until the next earnings season. I just Googled, I'm like, when is that 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariff reduction for China end? August 12th. So again, that will be just as you're getting into a new earnings season. And so, yeah, there's a lot that could keep us kind of busy and on our toes.
Yeah, next week we'll also hear from Campbell's Soup
for some earnings
too. And so you still have a couple more consumer-related type companies that are off calendar that sometimes we'll forget about. So that's important for those consumer packaged good companies because it's a good read on, like we were talking about the other day with Tim Stenovec, Carol, about when you're thinking the promotions at the grocery store, buy one, get one half off. Jen Partashes at Bloomberg Intelligence covers a lot of this. So that's a really important read when we're going to the store and trying to spend and obviously looking at cheaper products here. So it's going to be important to see kind of their view and their read on the economy and what they're seeing.
Before we wrap up, in terms of the bounce that we've seen in the month of May, technically a strong bounce, significant of anything, or time will tell?
Well,
especially when we still have some fundamental things we've got to figure out.
That's right. If you look at from even just zooming further back out from the April 8th lows for the S&P 500 on a closing basis, you saw more of the riskiest corners of the market, whether it's small caps like Russell 2000 or weak balance sheet stocks, things like that that are more tied to risk on, really taking off. But what was interesting the last couple of days, anytime you saw the S&P tick higher, you didn't see those groups join in quite as much, whether it's, say, the equal weight index. So that's something next week, in the next few weeks, I'm going to keep an eye on. But also, given there's been a wild run here at the S&P, up about 18-19% since those April lows, not to even mention just the rally in May. So I'm curious about those maybe riskier corners of the market, whether they continue to participate in the coming weeks.
It's a really important point, right? It's like you see the major averages, but you really want to kind of understand what's happening underneath. Hey, folks, don't forget Bloomberg Business Week on the weekend. You can catch our weekend broadcast. That is at 8 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. You can also catch our podcast feed that also features some of the highlights over the last week. That you can get wherever you download your podcast. Are you working on a piece for the weekend?
I am. Eric Weiner, who we had on earlier, is he's emailing me right now about some of the charts. I'm updating it, but I do have a charticle running tomorrow morning, actually, I believe. So it'll take us through the first 5 months of this year and where the S&P has come and potentially will go.
Some nice perspective, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right, we do want to remind everybody, we do not do this alone. We have a crowded control room in there. I want to thank our team, Anthony Mancini, Colin Tipton, Steve Lanzone, Avalon Purnell, Meredith Frank, Sarah Livesey, Justin Milliner. Avalon Purnell in there twice because, you know what? She really is supporting us. CC Charandoff, Sebastian Escobar, Elizabeth Sedrin, Ariel Agami. Who am I forgetting? Sorry if I'm forgetting you.
Tim?
It takes a village. Oh, yeah, Tim Stenovec.
That's right.
He'll be back on Monday. I will not, and then we'll be together on Tuesday. Guys, have a good and safe weekend. Catch our weekend broadcast and podcast. Do not go anywhere. President Trump in Balance of Power. Start right now.
Times more.
From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's worldwide headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences globally, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
Tonight, a presidential victory lap. President Trump just moments away from taking the stage at a U.S. steel plant just outside of Pittsburgh, where he's expected to hold a rally and celebrate his administration's decision to clear the contentious takeover of the company by Japan's Nippon Steel. We'll bring you those remarks and analysis with our reporters as both investors and union members listen for answers on the shape of that deal.